My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungy AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines, and we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy every week on the Voice of Wrestling Network.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. Fast to freedom. Just tonight together. Here everyone is singing.你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for August 11th, 2026. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. That's both on Twitter and on Blue Sky. And if you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes, and it'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation, no obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank our previous donors. And this is going to be an interesting episode for this week on Open the Voice Gate. We're going to be spending the entire time, more or less, talking about the Dragon Gate career of Shun Skywalker. I'm one of your hosts. It's real pal, Mike Spears, joined us also by your other co-host, Case Lowe. In Case, it's one of the most important weeks of my year right now.
Why is that?
That is because HEB and the Central Market groceries have started Hatch Green Chili Month. And it is all throughout there. They're roasting chilies in the parking lot. You can get Hatch Green Chili on everything. If you're someone like my wife who does not like spicy food, she hates going to the grocery right now. I am just over the moon because I can get lemon and Hatch chili cookies, and I think they are the best things on.
Mike, I just was never expecting that to be something that was thrown at me. I talk for a living, and I do feel like I'm at a bit of a loss for words on that one. It's chili or chilies. What's happening?
Hatch is a green chili that is native to more New Mexico, but it's also a big thing in Texas. And the big deal is that it's a chili that gets roasted, and it provides like a certain kind of heat and flavor to it that it is not dissimilar to like being like a completely jacked up serrano pepper, but it is one of the things that in Texas now, like I go out every week to get my tortillas, because because fresh tortillas are some of the best things on earth. And now they start putting hatch chilies in it. Just at the grocery store, they put hatch chilies in virtually everything. It disgusts my wife. I love
I'm very happy for you, I think, is where I want to land on
it.
that. I
Fair
think
enough.
I'm
Fair enough.
happy. I'm a little thrown off by that still. I don't understand the Texas culture that's at play here, but it's not my job to. I'm holding it down here in the Midwest.
Yeah, no, that the tornadoes have been hitting y'all pretty hard and fierce over the last few days. But we waited a little bit to kind of do this episode tonight. And unless you have a wrestling curveball that you're about to throw at me, but to lead off, it's going to be a time where we're going to finally kind of unpack and put a bow, actually unpack, repack, and then put a bow on the career of the guy who's kind of dominated Dragon Gate for at least the last 8 years since Shun Skywalker.
It's a pretty monumental episode, and I think we've talked about this since he announced his departure in June. That I think the idea of Shun Skywalker exiting Dragon Gate, even at this time last year, even if you want to go back 12 months ago to Dangerous Gate when it was Kakuta versus Skywalker, and we had just gotten past a Yamato versus Shun Skywalker Open the Dream Gate title match with the stipulation that if Shun lost, he would leave the promotion. The idea then, 13 months ago or 12 months ago, as we got into Skywalker versus Kakuta, this guy would be leaving the promotion. It just felt like such an abstract thought. And even with his flirtations with New Japan and his desires to run produce shows and sort of, the oddities that we knew about Shun as a person and as a wrestler, he still felt like he was the guy that tied everything great in Dragon Gate together. And throughout the 2020s, he's been the main character of this promotion. Throughout the 2020s, he's been one of the very best wrestlers in the entire planet. For the better part of a decade now, he's been one of the most exciting wrestlers on this roster. And I would say since 2019, he's been the guy that I've turned to more than anybody for entertainment out of Dragon Gate. On a personal level, he's my favorite wrestler, and he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He's up there with Kobashi and with Mochizuki and with Samoa Joe at his peak, and with the Bucks. Skywalker is not far behind that list of guys that I mentioned just on a personal level. So the idea of him leaving this promotion, even if it was expected, even if it was almost an open secret by the time that it was announced, is still something that I've had a really hard time wrapping my head around. I found his farewell tour to be bizarre. I found his last match with Hamare to be really strange. And then I got to the point where on Sunday afternoon, I was writing about Hamare versus Shun Skywalker from the opening night of Rey de Parejas 2026. And that's when it hit me. And that's when I was able to finally start to contextualize and review and analyze this guy's 10 years in Dragon Gate. And I am somber about this. This is sort of a devastating podcast for me, because I think maybe just because he was around, I was avoiding the realities of this. But now that he is gone, now that he's no longer a member of the active Dragon Gate roster and he's a freelance wrestler, and as we reported in June from two separate sources close to the matter, we feel very confident that he is headed to New Japan. Many would assume during the finals of the G1. I have not heard anything from anybody on the New Japan side about that. I know you haven't either. But
yeah, it's an open kind of thing, and at least I could say like nothing has really kind of changed from June when it was announced. At least on my side, I can't speak for you.
No, we have the same information. So now that he is gone, it is sort of a tough thing to grapple with. And before I throw it back to you, I will say the opposite of what I said, say, in 2022 when Kaito Ishida left the promotion. As we were dealing with exits of Kento and Takuma and Kazuma Sakamoto and Kaito Ishida in 2022, I talked specifically about Kaito Ishida, and I said this is way more of a short-term loss than it is a long-term loss. Dragon Gate will suffer in the interim until they find a guy that can fill the void that Ishida had on the roster. And I have no doubt that they'll be able to do that. As we sit here in 2026, unrelated to the Dragon Dia departure, the Shun Skywalker departure of Dragon Gate is one of those things that will be fine in the short term. I don't really think we'll feel the absence of Skywalker throughout the rest of this calendar year. I think the absence of Skywalker is going to be felt much more in the long term. The big shows next year, Kobe World next year, as guys like Yuki Yoshioka and Luis Mante and Jackie Kame and Strong Machine J and Madoka Kakuta continue their careers. That is when we will feel the absence of Shun Skywalker, when they are ready for their next chapter. And many of their stories up to this point have been told in some relation to Shun Skywalker and his involvement in their careers. And now that Shun is gone, I think in this current unit landscape, it doesn't really matter. It's what comes next. It's the unknown beyond now, where Dragon Gate is going to really suffer without Shun Skywalker as an
Mhm.
asset they can use on this roster.
Yeah, and the nickname I gave for him for a while during the Z-Brats days was that he was the Reggie Jackson of the promotion. He was the straw that stirred the drink. And it is one of those things that, like, I have several different emotions and feelings about the Skywalker departure that's finally kind of synthesized into kind of tonight. Like the first thing that is just like worth stating, this is probably, at least to me, this feels like more on like a profound level of a departure. Like in a different way, it feels more profound than even like Akira Tozawa in a way, because he is the guy that essentially, as Open the Voice Gate existed, Shun Skywalker was a part of this promotion, as from Shun Watanabe through to August 4th, 2026. And it is in a way that this epoch or this era of Dragon Gate, more so than talking about like the Reiwa Six and like the Yamato title run and things like this, but pulling the camera back even further and looking at it like as in like true kind of eras. This era is over and there's no revisiting it. There's no real kind of next step. And it's done at a very kind of interesting time where like Skywalker crosses 10 years in the promotion and then he's quickly kind of on his way out here. And it really, the departure that I kind of like liken it to in the way that you described it towards the end about like what is like Luis Monte loses that link that he has. Yuki Yoshioka loses that link that he has, and we can keep on going down the list there. It reminds me when SBK left, how like personal of a connection, at least within the roster, as how at least where he was and where Jackie Kamei was on the roster, and losing that tether, like taking a scissors and cutting that off and letting the string completely unfurl back to its individuals. That's gone. And yeah, no, I do think that as short term, maybe business wise, we'll see how things kind of do. I mean, we saw how big the number was last week in Cork and Hall for his final show. And but as we've been through these departures and over the last really 8 years, I'd say, case, we've seen how the company rubber bands back after an individual's departure, and people that, as we will get into how to really consider Shun Skywalker and where we kind of putting him on our mantle as we close the door on this stage of his career. It, 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 it it's interesting because you have people that we've had leave, like Shima, Masato Yoshino's retirement, Shingo Takagi, the aforementioned Akira Tozawa, and then Kaito Ishida, OWE kids. We keep on going down the line with it. And in a lot of ways, you had Shima leave in 2018 when he was already well cycled down the card. You had Shingo wanting to leave for years and literally doing everything you could do with him before he leaves. And then you look at Shun, where like that you have just those 10 years, and my god, as like I went back through this, I pulled out all of my notebooks that I've really ever used for Dragon Gate coverage, and they're sitting right next to me, and reading through them and reading through kind of the progression of Shun Watanabe's career in Dragon Gate. It left me with like kind of an aching feeling towards the end of it.
Oh God, yeah. There's no other. I think you hit the nail on the head with it's probably the closest thing to the Tozawa departure and this might be a hard thing for maybe the lapsed Dragon Gate fan to comprehend. Maybe somebody that was super emotionally invested in Monster Express, and maybe the mixture of Tozawa leaving in 2016 with some of the booking fall off, with some of the changes, and then the pandemic, and then where we are now, even though that was 10 years ago. We interact with a lot of people within our community that they're now sort of at a 10-year crossroads with Dragon Gate, where they're looking at this promotion and are for whatever reason are not adapting or evolving, or are just not interested in the modern day product. But Skywalker had a much more accomplished Dragon Gate career from 2016 to 2026 than Tozawa did from 2006 to 2016 when he left. I do feel though that they are the most similar in their exits. Again, Shingo, by the time that he left, it was a bigger deal as a headline than it was in actuality, because we all felt like Shingo had done everything he could do in this promotion.
Yeah, and you had Shingo leave after the OWE split and after kind of running a self angle at that Kobe World Show that kind of was staging us for what would happen that fall.
Yeah, and so the Shima thing is off in its own little universe, and you can put Lindemann and Takuma in with that, but otherwise, this is a far bigger deal than Kento and Takuma, even if that felt catastrophic at the time. This is a bigger deal than Ishida. This is a bigger deal than Daya. I mean, the Daya one stung more in the moment than I think this one did. But again, as we project 6 months, 12 months, 24 months from now, I think the Shun stuff is going to hurt way more. And that's because, and I don't want to step on any of the questions that we got. And by the way, thank you to everybody who dropped a question on the Open the Voice Gate channel and the Voices of Wrestling Discord. I'm really excited to get into those. But I think that Brave Gate run and the fallout we got from that Brave Gate run with Daya in 2024 and 2025, I think we saw what we could presumably think will be the peak of this guy's career. Now, maybe his next step in whatever company he's in, maybe he all blows us away and he takes a step up from that and he becomes the best junior heavyweight wrestler in the world. And by the way, if that happens, awesome. I am here for it. But in terms of what Dragon Daya could do in Dragon Gate, I think we felt like we saw the best version of him. And I think this thing that stings with Skywalker is the same thing that stung with Tozawa, which is that for as great as they were, at times the best wrestler on the roster, with the roster that has one of the highest working standards in all of wrestling, at times one of the best characters in all of wrestling, at times one of the most charismatic guys in all of wrestling, a guy that tied things together, was the heartbeat of the promotion throughout various points in their career, is that with Tozawa, I mean, that main event run was only 5 years long. It was 2011 to 2016, and he never won the Dreamgate title. He only had, the Blood Warriors and Mad Blanky stuff into that one face turn with Monster Express, and then he was gone. And with Skywalker, it just feels like there was so much there to explore. And I think it was John Carroll who asked the question of, we'll get to it, but something about feeling robbed about not getting Skywalker's babyface turn after the Z-Brats and Psypatra era. And that's the thing that's going to eat at me, is I don't think we saw the peak of this guy's career. For as great as he was in 2021, for as great as he was, I mean, we'll go through it here. I've got some numbers here I want to hit off in just a second about where I voted for him in the SFM 50 over the last 5 years. But, we're talking about a guy who from 2021 to now, I guess 2021 to 2025, because I certainly would not say this year, but for the last 5 years, he was a top 5 wrestler in the world, in my opinion. Mike, what have I said time and time again on this podcast? He's the best wrestler of the 2020s, not named Will Ospreay or Bryan Danielson. We are losing a guy who I don't think hit his peak yet, because I think we saw a flash of what it could look like in 2021 in Masquerade with clap crowds before he fully found his charisma defending the title. And granted, I love these guys as wrestlers, but defending the title against Kaito Ishida and Kazuma Sakamoto, among others. I think there is a version of Skywalker as a babyface that could have been Dreamgate champion, that legitimately could have been the best Dreamgate champion we've ever seen. And we're not going to get that now. And that eats away at me.
Yeah, like not to get completely into it, it hurts the fact that, like, I've called myself kind of a Dragon System traditionalist or conservative, like in like my mindset on like booking and how things have gone for like the last 12 months and really how things have gone for the last 13 months. about this, but that is going to be a hole that can't be filled. Just in the same way that Tozawa Run on Top is a hole that can't be filled. I'm trying to think of other like more devastating or possible ones. I guess Milano Collection AT never becoming like Dreamgate champion and getting his full like run. Like these are the kind of things that we're talking about. And when you were talking about that and adding Shun Skywalker's face turn into the mix, we're including in the added weight that this guy was a 3-time Open the Dreamgate champion before the age of 30. Like all of that he has accomplished has been things that he has done in his 20s. As long as he was viable in the Voices of Wrestling 30 under 30 poll, and when I was voting in it, Shun Skywalker was my number 1 wrestler in the world under the age of 30. And it is something where I think wrestlers and I think that this promotion and the family of promotions that the Dragon System inhabits has like shown that even though it's a young person's promotions, and you see like, and it's been marketed with like Shima in his 20s, like up to the modern day with Xenostal Nova being the next kind of version of that. Well, in wrestling, you really, if your body is holding up, and that's like a question with the Dragon Gate guys, to be fair, your 30s are when like your brain really kind of kicks in, and it's not just physical ability. And we're not going to have that aspect of Shun Skywalker and Dragon Gate. What I am going to
and by the way, his brain might end up being a detriment. He might be the only wrestler that ages where his body does him more favors than his mind. That is an asterisk that we have to put on his career.
He could end up being a Jericho. He could very easily end up being a Jericho. Like
that is what a terrifying and possibly accurate comparison. That you're so right.
Well, we've talked about like 3 of my favorite wrestlers within the first 20 minutes of this career. Like I still have a place in my heart for Chris Jericho. I was cackling with the Painmaker. When Taz said that this Painmaker is freaking nuts, I was like, yes, Taz, you're absolutely right. He is freaking nuts. But it is like that inability to have like that filter that Jericho has now proceeded to show into his 50s that, you know, that might be the issue with Skywalker in his 30s and 40s. And that might have been his issue in year 9 of his Dragon System career, to be fair.
So let me read you this. This is from my review of Skywalker versus Homare, the first night of Rey de Parejas, August 4th. We talked about this show on audio last week. My written reviews up at voicesofwrestling.com. And I wrote way more about Skywalker than I did any of the tag league matches, and we'll cover everything Rey de Parejas related that's made tape next week, and then we'll get to those days at the end of the month. But we wanted to take a week here, pause on the tag league, pause on the Michinoku Pro stuff, which fear not is returning at the end of August, and do the Skywalker pod. And again, this is, I was very stream of conscious as I was writing this review for Skywalker versus Homare, not necessarily talking about the match, really hardly talking about the match, but just finally getting my ducks in a row on what it means that Shun Skywalker has left Dragon Gate. And I wrote this paragraph in which I said, since December 2018, Skywalker has consistently been the promotion's most entertaining wrestler. His rise to the main event scene in 2019 helped usher in a fresh era of the promotion that was only improved upon once he came back from an excursion in Mexico in 2020. From 2021 to 2025, I ranked Skywalker 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 3rd in the SFM 50. With the exception of 2020, a year in which he only worked 58 matches, with the bulk of them taking place in a pandemic-stricken Mexico, Skywalker finished with at least one match in my Voices of Wrestling Match of the Year ballot from 2019 to 2025. In 2019, 2021, 2023, and 2025, Skywalker finished with 2 matches in my top 10. In 2022, he wrestled my Match of the Year. That match, a tag with Diamante against Jackie Funky Kame and Jason Lee, is one of the greatest Dragon Gate matches I've ever seen, the most recent 5-star match from the promotion, and finished 16th overall in that year's Match of the Year poll, making it the 3rd highest ranked match in Dragon Gate history, behind the 2020 unit disbands match between RED and the Toryumon generation, which placed 9th, and the world-renowned epic between Masaki Mochizuki and Shingo Takagi in 2015, which finished 11th. That, to me, is his Hall of Fame plaque. That is the argument for Shun being a Mount Rushmore guy. That is, as best I can summarize, this guy's importance to the promotion. He debuts around this time 10 years ago. I think, April 22nd, 2016. I hate that I know that off the top of my head, but that was his official debut date. We started getting footage of him right around Kobe World that year. He exists on the roster as a guy, first Shun Watanabe, then Shun Skywalker in 2016. It's 2017, I remember with extreme detail, despite the fact that he wasn't really involved in anything great. And then by the time we got to him versus UT on December 4th, 2018, I felt like this guy was leading the charge into something different and something exciting. And Alan Forel and I have that podcast on his Pro Wrestling Torch feed from January of 2019, in which we were talking about how there was something different happening with this house style. And it was by way of Shun Skywalker. And I don't think from there, as long as he was in Japan, he ever left his foot off the gas. Mike, do you think that is a fair way of summarizing his career if we were to put his career on a Hall of Fame plaque right now?
Yeah, I mean, ye it it is, like, remarkable. We took some time that we will get into the matches that we've selected in a minute, but the thing one of the big things, like, struck me as we were doing this is that this is someone that essentially, as Mochizuki Dojo starts up in 2018, other than his COVID year, he is one of, if not the most interesting person in the promotion. And he's always been treated like with a level, even in the Mochizuki Dojo days when he's getting the shit kicked out of him by Yamahulk. He is eating all of the finishers and getting so many kickouts. Like he gets a kick out of Galleria at a point where someone who wasn't Shun Skywalker and maybe Benkei in the point of the career would be down for three. We wouldn't even question it. Like for 8 years that this guy has been a concentrated force in this promotion. And even, I mean, 2016, 2017, we're talking about a guy that still mattered at a way that I would argue, with exception of the glimpse that we got of SB Kento at that time period, no one as a young wrestler has mattered as much during their time period as Shun Skywalker has. Maybe Yamato in 2006 and 2007. Maybe Yamato because of how strongly he was pushed from the start. But the list after that is essentially Shun Skywalker, and that's it.
So you wanted to make the argument, we wanted to have the conversation, and we had this, it must have been December of last year. We had a pretty lengthy Dragon Gate Mount Rushmore conversation because I was at a point where I was feeling very comfortable putting Skywalker not only in that conversation, but quite frankly, as the fourth head on that Mount Rushmore. And what we want to do tonight is we both picked 3 Shun Skywalker matches from the archives that are on the Dragon Gate Network. We'll have links in the Discord channel and maybe in the show description, because Lord knows I know none of you will be able to find them on the Dragon Gate Network. That's not a you thing, that's a network thing. It's impossible to use. It was really frustrating to find these matches. But
we did the work for y'all. It's okay.
Yes, we got links. It's going to be okay. And you know what? The footage is crystal clear HD and it looks great as long as you can find it. So we've got links. We've got matches we want to talk about. We've got questions to answer. But Mike, I'm going to throw it to you for just a second because I don't know entirely how you want to get into this. But
sure,
I think you and I both agree that if we were chiseling a Dragon Gate Mount Rushmore, and Mike and I would not do it on stolen land. We are not like the U.S. government. We would do it on our own private property. Nobody is getting harmed in the making of this Mount Rushmore.
No. We're going to do it completely by the books, and it will be done in a way that you could gladly take your grandchildren to in 75 years.
You know, I was at a bison farm yesterday in Northwest Indiana, which is which is a real thing that exists.
Why did I talk about hatch chilies to start off the show? I want to now know much more about this bison farm, man.
Well, did you see the video about 3 weeks ago of the old guy getting flipped by the bison at Yellowstone?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the happiest moment of my life was learning that video was not AI. That made me so happy to learn that video and the airtime that man received was real. And he's okay, so it's okay to laugh at. He's a few broken bones, but he's fine. So,
but he got hit by a bison. Of course he's going to... It's like getting hit by a truck, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, you know what I do for a living. Video like that comes out, Mike, you clear the schedule the next day. That is morning show fodder if there ever was one. I was in
How many quarter hours did you get out of that?
Well, it was 2 quarter hours in real time, and then revisiting it, I think twice after that, which normally like our best stuff we'll revisit once, but I think this one we got 2 times out of because one of the people that I do the show with had not seen the video before we went on air, and so we had her do a live reaction to it, and her reaction to it was so funny that was just like, all right, great. Like we could just play music the rest of the day. Show's over. Like it's not going to get funnier than this. But we were breaking down that bison video, and it turns out, and I grew up in Indiana, but I did not know this, that there's a 150-acre bison farm in Hobart, Indiana, and they listened to the show that I work on, and they reached out and were like, hey, we'd love to have you come down. We'll give you guys a private tour of the bison farm if you guys want. So we had to get through Lollapalooza last week, but once we got through that, I was like, all right, hop in the car. We're going to go to Northwest Indiana. I spent a lot of time around bison yesterday. It made me even more sensitive to the plight of the Native Americans than I usually am, which I'm already very sensitive to. And it's very sad to think about after hearing some stuff yesterday about their relationship with the bison and how they were both viciously slaughtered in the 1800s. I just want to make it clear, our Draggate Mount Rushmore is not on stolen land.
Good.
Anyways, I think you and I would agree, and I think it's undeniable, that you've got Shima, you've got Masaki Mochizuki, and you've got Shingo Takagi as the guys that you can start chiseling in right now. I would really be hard-pressed to hear an argument that didn't involve those three. And I think if you're a specific sliver of Dragon Gate fan on the Dragon Gate pie chart, you might want to fade Shingo just a little bit. I'm really not interested in hearing that. I think that's absurd. I don't want to hear it. For us, it's those three guys. And then from there, that fourth spot, I wouldn't agree, but you could certainly make a case for Magnum if you wanted to just go off of historical importance. You could go for Doi for longevity and the list of great matches he's had. You could go for Yoshino. You could go for Yamato. But by the end of last year, I felt pretty confident in the idea that I would take the 10 years of Skywalker's career, at that point, 2016 to 2025, over Masato Yoshino's 2001 to 2021 or Yamato's 2006 to 2025. Not solely from an in-ring standpoint. I think historically Yoshino still laps most of those guys that I just mentioned. But from an all-encompassing what they mean to this promotion, what they've done in every aspect of Dragon Gate, I think Skywalker is right there with them, and I think that I would have him ahead of Yamato or Yoshino at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's an entirely kind of fair argument because it is those three, and then you're trying to figure out who the last one is. And to me, there are only three real viable candidates to be that fourth person, and it is Yoshino, Yamato, and now Shun Skywalker. I think Magnum, in the same way that Dragon Kid wouldn't be up there, it's just they just don't necessarily fill the full criteria, I feel like, for that. So I did a little kind of mini thought exercise that I shared Case on here that I kind of wanted to take us through for a second. One of the neat things about, maybe like morbidly neat things about Shun Skywalker leaving the promotion when he did, is that he gave us a nice clean 10-year chunk of his first 10 years in Dragon Gate, where his first 10 years as a pro wrestler. And I thought it would be interesting in these kind of conversations that, yeah, for Shingo, you got essentially 14 years. For Yoshino, you got 21. Yamato, it's still going on. And then for Shima, you have 21 years with that. But with Yamato, you only, or with Shun, you only have 10. So what I did was I found for the six kind of candidates, and for Mochizuki, because he started in WAR, his timer starts when he started in Toryumon, so we're going to be going 1999 to 2009, not 1995 to 2005. I counted up all of their title wins and tourney victories, just as like a pure kind of counting stat kind of thing. And as kind of a thought exercise to think about where Shima, Mochizuki, Shingo, Yamato, and Yoshino were when in their careers when Shun Skywalker made their exit. Just because I feel like at this point, like, that's as much as you're going to be able to evaluate Shun. So like, let's normalize the sample. Does this all make kind of sense so far?
Yes.
So the interesting thing through this, and I'm not going to go through and go down each cell and read off like with this, is that when we had this conversation before, I was very firm that Yamato was number 4 on my Mount Rushmore. And after doing this, I still kind of am a little bit of that opinion, but it is a lot more close. So Shun and Yamato are the two, along with Shima, who had the most top title victories in their first 10 years of their career. That includes the UDG title as well as the Dreamgate title. Yamato had 4 Dreamgate runs, Shun had 3, and Shima had 3 combined ones there. And then you go and you look like further down the list at like trios and twin titles. And the interesting thing is that Yamato was really a belt collector in his first 10 years of his career. He has 4 Triangle Gate runs. He has 7 Twin Gate runs. He has 1 other title victory, which is the Freedom Gate title. He wins King of Gate. He wins the Summer Venture Tag League. He wins 2 other kind of tournaments. Shun has 4 trios titles, 1 Twin Gate title. He was the MLW World Middleweight title. The only the only like big tourney victory that he has was last year's Ray Day Parejas, but then he has the Rookie Ranking League, and I think there was another like Triangle Gate League that he won for that there. And when you compare that to Yoshino did not win a Dreamgate title in the first 10 years of his career. Mochizuki only wins the Dreamgate title once in the first 10 years of his Dragon System career. And I think for like Yoshino, we have to put him to the side because at least, and when you're talking about the first 10 years of the career, because of that, even though he has 4 Ray Day Parejas or Summer Venture Tag League victories during that time period, the top line stuff just isn't there, even if he has 5 Brave Gate title runs there. But I thought it was kind of an interesting kind of exercise. It has made me think that I think Yamato and Shun might be an interchangeable kind of what is your personal taste of the day kind of scenario for that 4th Mount Rushmore spot, and it kind of puts Yoshino down with Magnum and Dragon Kid in my mind. But I thought it was just kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about in a way to kind of contextualize at least what Shun had accomplished in comparison to what we consider as the most important people in Dragon System history.
Let me ask you this, and this shouldn't swing anybody's vote one way or another. I'm just going to ask you off the top of your head what comes to mind first, because I'm really curious to see what your answer is, because I think with Shun, I have a really definitive answer for this. What is the most memorable angle centered around Yamato?
His face turn in 2016.
Okay, so you would say end of the cage match, Dead or Alive 2016.
I would say that. I'll give you 3. I would say that. I would say before under that the Kobe World promo. I think that in 2024, I think that would be number 2 there with him. And then it's kind of tough after that. And if you go like further back into his career, I think the fact that he won the Dreamgate title in his first challenge as young as he did was a kind of earth-shattering thing for its time. So those would be the 3 moments that I would think so would be like the if you would have to decide them. But if I was going to go number 1, it would be the face turn and the formation of Tri Vanguard in 2016, and then leading to his true ace Dreamgate run, which actually falls into the time period of which we're talking about in that 10-year continuity.
Great answer, because I didn't prep you for that at all. I was just kind of curious to see what you say, because I think
I've been thinking about this stuff a lot over the last week and a half.
Well, yeah, and I think the only other one that I would throw in there with Yamato, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but I have a very specific image of the Real Hazard formation in my head.
That was what I was thinking about, was the Real Hazard formation.
And I haven't seen it in so long that I'd have to go back and rewatch it before I include it in this conversation. But okay, that makes that conversation a little bit more interesting. I think, Shun is of the benefit of some of this stuff as recent, but he's also, he's existed in most of his career through what I always refer to as this content era, this overconsumption era, where I think part of the reason we have to do this podcast is because there are people that have probably watched almost all of Shun's career, like the way that we've watched all of it. And yet we're going to hit on so much stuff that people have forgotten about because they're beat over the head with new the entire time. And some of Shun's best work not only happened in this era, but it also happened during the pandemic, where there's a bit of a memory suck there as well. But he has a few really iconic angles that we'll likely touch on throughout this podcast. I was just curious as to what you would say with Yamato. But I think him in the cage match in 2016, I forgot about that Kobe World promo, but that's a great call there. That's a sort of a standalone angle that didn't really lead to anything, but it was, very much so a defining moment for him and something that we talked about in depth on this podcast at the time. We spent a ton of time talking about that. And then, yeah, some 2008 to 2010 sort of real hazard into him winning the belt for Kamikaze. Something in there, I would say, would be his top three.
Yeah, and I do think that personally, I'm still remaining to be a Yamato Mount Rushmore person, but I think that the conversation's a lot closer than I thought it was back in December.
Mm-hmm.
But
Are you ready in that case, Mike,
Mhm.
to talk about Shun Skywalker's career? And as I sort of go through some of the timeline stuff here, we'll hit on the matches we selected and go in chronological order there.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. This is a guy who I remember watching his debut. I've mentioned before, El Lindemann, Yuga Hayashi. He was the first guy that I watched debut in real time in 2014, and that's why I've always held a sort of special connection with Hayashi, El Lindemann. Ever since then, I saw Ishida debut. I saw Yamamura debut. I remember Futa Nakamura, who we now know as Ben K, coming into this world and being completely blown away by him. As for Shun Skywalker, his official debut is April 22nd, 2016, on a Dragon Gate Next show where he debuted under the name Shun Watanabe against Big R Shimizu. The earliest footage we have of him, the first match we have of Shun Watanabe on tape, is not the August 21st, 2016 show from Hakata Star Lanes. That is what we all saw first, but with the benefit of the Dragon Gate Network, we have a match earlier than that at our disposal, which I would highly recommend everybody go back and watch. It is Yamato versus Shun Watanabe from Dragon Gate Prime Zone Volume 45. You can search that on the network. It is a 10-minute match between Watanabe in his first ever televised match, and Yamato, who, Mike, this is August 13th, 2016, is only weeks removed from beating Shingo for the Open the Dream Gate title at Kobe World 2016. Have you ever seen this match?
I saw it probably at the time.
Mhm.
I have not revisited this match in many years. I think I rewatched it when we were young series when that was up and they were doing that in 2019. I think that had me go and look for this match here, but it's a really interesting match. Like for the sake of the fact that it's Yamato, the current Dreamgate champion, in someone's debut match, but also the fact that it was a almost like 12-minute match.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. It's super stiff. If I remember correctly, Watanabe gets his face busted open by Yamato.
Yeah, he gets a nosebleed.
It's a
pretty
crazy
early.
concept of your brand new babyface, generation defining Dreamgate champion against the lowest ranked guy on the roster. And so I would recommend everybody, if you haven't seen this match, go back and watch it because it's the earliest footage we have of Shun. But the first time that everybody else saw him was on August 21st, 2016. It was Kaito Ishida, Takahiro Yamamura, Big R Shimizu, and Shun Watanabe versus Don Fuji, El Lindemann, Hyo Watanabe, and KZ. Mike, I'm sure you remember this. Super confusing in the early days of these guys' career because we got a Hyo Watanabe and a
Right.
Shun Watanabe at the same exact time. And there was definitely some confusion in the early goings as to which guy was which.
Right, yeah, and, like, you had 3 of them, and at this time, they were just doing, black short tights with the guys, and it was, like, a thing, especially at the time that, like, the way that you kinda you were able to tell them apart was that Hyo was Hyo height and Shun was tall, and that was kinda the only way, but then the confusing thing you also had was the same guy that was essentially Shun Watanabe's height was Futa Nakamura, who you knew because he was the beefy guy who already got concussions during World Tag League or Summer Adventure Tag League.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the thing is, Ben and Shun have the same start date of April 22nd. By the time that Shun debuts, Ben is already in the Summer Adventure Tag League. That's how quickly things were happening for Ben K at that point. For Shun, a bit more of a slower roll.
And it's worth stating that Shun came into the dojo at the right time for someone graduating high school. Futa Nakamura, Benkei, was a collegiate wrestler. So he came into the promotion older, and it was known at that time that essentially Futa Nakamura was going to be on an accelerated path that ended up happening, where Shun Skywalker was much more of the traditional kind of debutee that was going to be brought along.
And so, while the network does not have that, because why would they have 2016 TV readily available after almost 10 years of the network? The earliest bit of Skywalker footage you can see post Prime Zone is going to be Dangerous Gate 2016 in a 8-man tag with Don Fuji, El Lindemann, Futa Nakamura, and Shun Watanabe against Gamma, Kaito Ishida, Takahiro Yamamura, and Hyo Watanabe. He would make his Cork and Hall debut very shortly after that in a 6-man tag with Kanda, Kagatora, and Fuji against Ishida, Yamamura, and Watanabe. This is when we really start to see some fun interplay between Ishida and Yamamura. Now that they are not the lowest ranked guys on the roster and they have Hyo and Shun and incoming Yoshioka and to some degree Ben K beneath them, you start to see those guys develop more of a personality. And then you get this great run of Corkins at the end of 2016. These shows are great and the Shun stuff is really entertaining. Where on October 12th, 2016, you get Shima, Dragon Kid, and Gamma versus Futa Nakamura, Hyo Watanabe, and Shun Watanabe. Just a 13-minute 6-man tag that
This
is
match rocks.
It's violent and it's disgusting and it kicks off that Corkin show. And it's mean and it's aggressive and it's everything that's great about Shima wanting to kick somebody's ass. And this is really where, we had already developed our thoughts on Futa Nakamura, who had become Ben K at this point. But this is the match where for both Hyo and Shun, I think everybody started to raise an eyebrow and go like, oh, okay, all right. The Dragon Gate's been pumping them out lately with Lindemann and Ishida and Yamamura. And you know what? I kind of like these new kids too. So they have a match at Gate of Destiny, which is a young guys tag, Nakamura, Watanabe versus Ishida, Tamanaga, and Yamamura, where the class of 2016 goes over. And then that leads us to the November 2016 Cork and Hall show, where the young guys, meaning Hyo and Shun and Ben, and now Yuki Yoshioka and Yatsumi Takashima, get a ton of time on this show because they come out with a microphone. They announced that they are rebranding. A lot of these guys were going to have new names, and if they weren't getting new names, they were going to debut December 1st, 2016. We get the setup of the iconic 10-man 12-1-16 tag match, and we also get Kagatora and Susumu versus Ben K and Shun Skywalker, the debuting Shun Skywalker, on this November 10th, 2016 show. Mike, you were watching in real time. I was watching in real time. How could you even describe the monstrosity that was the beginning of Shun Skywalker and his gear in 2016?
Yeah, like that's the other really magical thing about Shun Skywalker's career is that he ends up being one of the coolest guys in the company's history and has some of, I think, like with some of the most like distinguishable gear outputs, the mask, the overmask, all of that. In 2016, he is a rookie, so they give on that November cork, and you have Hyo is going to keep on being Hyo Watanabe, but he's emphasizing the leopard part because his kanji is the same as Hyo. Shun goes by Shun Skywalker because he wants to skywalk over the sky, and he comes out in a full body costume that the mask looks a lot more like the lucha libre quote unquote legend Teneblas. And the deal with it is with a full body suit, a kind of cape that comes off of it. And the real kind of atrocious thing about it, and the thing that if you show a photo of him in this costume and like his gear in 2026, the thing that's going to really throw people off is that his color note was green, but because he was a rookie and like you don't have the like for like your first rookie costume, you're not going to be putting like thousands of dollars into it. The mask, the bodysuit, and most importantly, his gloves were 3 different tones of green.
That's exactly right. I wrote in my review at real time, and I pulled up a lot of my old reviews because I've covered Skywalker's career from the beginning in written word. I wrote for this match, very rarely does Dragon Gate swing and miss, but this Shun Skywalker getup is a strong thumbs down. It's a complete disaster. He's wearing 2 different shades of green, and the attire doesn't fit him properly. I hope this was a rough draft because the name, while being dorky, works with the promotion. This outfit, however, works for no one. And then I compare this match to the opening of a SmackDown episode, which I meant as a compliment before giving it 3 3/4 stars.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
I mean, like 2016, I think you can get away with calling it an opening to a good SmackDown at that
This
point.
is the last vestige of anything good on WWE TV. And I feel like even by the fall of 2016, I'm largely out. But this must have been a period where there was something Kevin Owens related or something AJ Styles related that I was into. Or maybe I meant like 2002 SmackDown. I found that to be very odd that I made that comparison. But nevertheless, it's in there. It's permanent.
Yeah, man. I mean, I have a review of the first Joey Janela spring break that I wish didn't happen. We all have those things.
Very impactful night for this podcast. So you get to that November Corkin show where, again, now we're talking about a guy whose official debut is in April. We get TV from him the first time in August. And by November, he's in a 3 3/4 star tag match with Susumu and Kagatora and Ben K. He's got a new gimmick. He's got new gear. There's clearly some level of investment with him. And that takes us to a match that we've talked about extensively. I'm sure we'll talk about again in December. But Mike, just quickly, because we have a bunch of other stuff that we want to hit on.
Yeah.
12-1-16, Shima, Dragon Kid Gamma, Don Fuji, Masaki Mochizuki versus Ben K. Hyo, the debuting Katsumi Takashima, the debuting Yuki Yoshioka, and Shun Skywalker. We're now 10 years removed from this match. What was the impact immediately afterwards?
I mean, this was the match where the class of 2016 got their stripes. Like, we've done episodes about this match, and it is, for the way the Dragon system operates, especially as a rookie, you usually have one of these matches where, is it a shoot? No, it's not a shoot. Are there any pulled punches? Ask Katsumi Takashima. It is a vicious, brutal, uncomfortable affair that I think has left kind of such an indelible impact that I think that if you go to any hardcore Dragon System fan, you just say the date, they know what you're talking about. It is, but for those five guys, and really for Shun, Hyo, and Benkei, this was the match that after this point that they were now fully out. Well, they were rookies on the roster, but now they had a little bit of elevation because of Yuki Yoshioka and Takashima coming in partially, but more so because they went through a match like that. And I always had to remind myself that, yes, Dragon Kid was a part of this match.
Yes, Dragon Kid was the one that maybe did not fit in as much as everybody else, but he's still vicious. I mean, the last time I watched this, I remember thinking wow, God, look at Dragon Kid getting in there too. So it's very similar to a match that we'll talk about here in just a minute of the other consequential Shun Skywalker match from December 1st, the Skywalker and Daya versus Diamante and Daya Inferno match, in which I think, I would say up until Skywalker announced his departure, I would call 12-1-16 one of the most consequential and impactful and influential matches in the history of Dragon Gate within the confines of its own promotion. It's not influential in the same way that Blood Generation versus Do Fixer from Ring of Honor is. It's influential in the way that it influenced the booking of this promotion in the same way that 5 years later, Skywalker and Daya versus Daya Inferno and Diamante, that mask versus mask match, I would say up until the last 6 months when Daya left and now Skywalker left, that had the same level of impact and the same level of influence. And, Skywalker was involved up to that point. That's why I say he's the thread that ties everything together, because these were two matches that he was the focal point of, and they're as important as anything that's happened in the modern day history of Dragon Gate.
Yeah, and I feel like that for the Skywalker era epoch, it really starts at that night, and it kind of gives you that 10-year stretch of him that I feel like that we talked about his gear and how bad it was at that like at one juncture of his career. He gets it evened out. He ends up as he progresses in this phase of his career too, he loses the bodysuit, he gets himself into better shape, and he color coordinates, and he becomes kind of the guy that instead of talking about how bad this costume is, we're like, my God, this guy has so many different costumes at this stage of his career.
Yeah, yeah. This is where we start being very concerned about the finances of Shun Skywalker because every single show
he
he has new gear.
Yeah, I never found out if he had like a sponsor or someone he sold all those masks to. I had to assume he had to, and there were some good looks. I liked when he kind of had the Shiryu kind of wavy kind of stencil with neon colors on his gear. I thought that was a really good look for him. And honestly, other than like the initial kind of galling 2016 look with this, like that is kind of the young pre-excursion Skywalker that is the version of him that's cemented in my mind.
As we progress into 2017, he spends the first half of the year pretty banged up and injured, and really, despite other than a Kobe World appearance, that first half of the year he's not really around much. You see Ben K take off in a real way. You see Yoshioka start to find his footing. This is now the beginning of 2017, the rise and the peak of Takahiro Yamamura before his unfortunate first catastrophic injury. But Hyo and Shun sort of start to fall by the wayside. And with Shun, it's health, with Hyo, it's talent, or at least what was perceived to be lack of talent. And it's not until the back half of 2017 where you start to see what would become of Shun Skywalker over the next year, which is a guy that did a lot of big, high flying moves. He did not always connect with them, but he was always very entertaining. And this period of late 2017 through about halfway through 2018, it became an ongoing joke in my reviews where almost every Skywalker match was the same, and that he would be in the opening 6-man, 8-man, 10-man tag team match, however many guys there were in it. He wouldn't do a ton, but they would make sure. And this is an era of Dragon Gate that, unfortunately, I have to compare to 2026 eyes where things are not as detail oriented. People making this show, producing these shows, booking these shows don't always have the eye for detail that I want out of Dragon Gate. But in 2017 and 2018, it was not lost on me that Shun might not do a ton. He might not be getting pushed a ton. But in all of these matches, they would make sure that at some point everybody would go to the floor and Skywalker would do a giant springboard moonsault to the floor. And that was his thing for a while. He would do it in Corkin, he would do it in Sambo Hall, he would do it on the big shows. And for a while, it was a lot of trial and error with him. But as long as he hit that big moonsault, he left an impression on people. And before joining Mochizuki Dojo, that was sort of the reputation that he was developing, was a little clunky, a little spotty, but he had a great moonsault to the floor.
Yeah, and really, until Mochizuki Dojo, his ceiling felt like that he was going, even though he had the height, he was so lanky that he was going to be kind of the flyer for this generation. And even like watching through the footage that we'll talk about, the way that he would move and the way that he would just like always have the command and everyone set up for the K Brado to the floor. And then also the one that I love is when he would run to one corner and then sprint across the ring to the other corner and slingshot himself over the ropes. That was one that also had that level of holy crap, this guy might die on this thing or crack his skull open. But it was exciting, and it is something that maybe now, thinking about how much we've been getting into 1990s junior heavyweights, Michinoku Pro, it's a style that like you see like a through line to how Shun was working at that time period. It would not have been out of place in a 1996 Michinoku Pro show.
Well, that's funny you say that because I was just about to bring this up where it just speaks to just culturally how things are different. Last week we did the podcast and I was recording in the same room as my lovely girlfriend who knows nothing about wrestling, not interested, doesn't care for it, doesn't like it, but likes me. And we were hanging out. I was like, I have to do the podcast. She's like, that's okay, but I still want to hang out Wednesday and just be around. Could I just hang out and listened to it and listened to you talk. I was like, yeah, fucking knock yourself out. Like, that sounds awful, but go ahead. And afterwards, she was asking me all these questions about wrestling culture. And I found myself telling this very beautiful woman things like Twitter wars and pro wrestling only. And I said the name Dylan Hales, and I'm just watching her eyes glaze over. But I bring this up because even in 2018, as Skywalker's now on the cusp of joining Mochizuki Dojo, culturally within our bubble within wrestling, it was still very much discourse heavy in terms of Dragon Gate guys and anti New Japan guys and Southern Indie guys and guys that only liked US Indies in a way, like outside of Ring of Honor, like cared about AAW and AIW and PWG and all these things. Like, it was still, it was culturally rich to be consumed with wrestling and to have very strong opinions on wrestling. And I was trying to explain to my girlfriend that, like, oh, it's not really like that anymore. Like, the people that talk most about wrestling don't seem to actually like wrestling. But there was a time where what you liked in wrestling really, really mattered. And you had to defend your opinions a lot. And I say all of this because I was largely existing in a contingent of people, Dylan Hales among others, where I really liked talking wrestling with them, but a lot of those people really hated Dragon Gate. And Shun Skywalker was the one guy around this time period that had all of their attention. And I specifically remember, do you remember, I'm going to butcher his blog name. I can't remember if it was Sour Grapes or if it was Concrete Grapes. But do you remember Sammy? Like, I think his Twitter name was Sammy JD.
Faintly.
Okay. He and I used to do so many. We did so many podcasts together. We broke down Wrestle Kingdom 1 on a podcast once. And that was supposed to be a series that never ended up coming to fruition. But anyways, like, I used to talk to Sam all the time. And he was a very staunch, like, pro Lucha, pro Timothy Thatcher, hated Dragon Gate. And that was like an archetype of a guy that you would get in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. That was a type of person that existed. But Sam was always like, I like Shun Skywalker. He reminds me of a Michinoku pro wrestler. He feels weird and kind of out of place, and his offense is a little goofy. But you know what? That guy could have fit in, just like you said, in 1996 Michinoku Pro. He just happens to be working 2018 Dragon Gate. And in real time, that was the thought process with him, which is why, before I throw it back to you, which is why when he started getting rapidly elevated at the end of 2018 into 2019, it all happened so quickly, and it was all so shocking that before we knew it, he was wrestling Pac in a Dreamgate match, and it all seemed to work and to be right and to feel good, because 4 months before that, it was like, maybe this guy will win the Bravegate belt one day.
Yeah, I mean, I have had up his match history as we've been talking, and I had to remind myself that he was actually in a King of Gate in 2018, and for him, his only victory in that tournament, back when this tournament was pre-Kobe World, was a count-out victory over Yasushi Kanda. He loses to Yamato, he loses to KZ, and he loses to Benkei.
And I don't remember the Yamato match or the KZ match, and those theoretically would have made tape because they were Hokkaido. I know at that point it was like the Hokkaido shows, it was still a triple shot, but it was like a 3-hour block of TV and you wouldn't get everything, which is why it's my holy grail is the Shingo Super Shisa singles match from 2016 that was taped but never aired because it was on one of those Hokkaido blocks. You know what? I think I rewatched the KZ match before World 2021. I might have rewatched both those. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but I remember them both being really, really good the last time I revisited them.
Yeah, and I do remember seeing the Benkei one because this was a televised Shingo Homecoming that, if I'm right, I'm going to click on this link. Yeah, no, this is the one that had Fujinami come into his hometown. They did almost 1,500 in Yamanashi that night.
Nice. That is good stuff. That was a fun show.
Yeah,
I remember liking that a lot.
I love the Shingo Homecoming shows. Remember when they brought Muto and they had fire and they had pyro in that little gym? Like the station paid for it.
I forgot about that.
And it was just like, what are we doing here? I just saw Yasushi Kanda do a King of Gate match. What's happening?
This promotion, man, used to be something. I'm getting very emotional thinking about the departure of Shun Skywalker now. So in the summer of 2018, again, it feels like Shun's going to be something, but again, our projections for him at this point, Ben K already had a Dreamgate challenge against Mochizuki in March of 2018. Yoshioka starting to find his own. Now we've got Jason Lee on the roster, and he was sort of the adopted son of that class of 2016. Hyo at this point is not doing anything of note, but Shun's there, and we like Shun, and we like when Shun makes tape, and we like when he's doing interesting stuff. And so we get the
Kota
formation.
Minoura's there.
That's right. Kota Minoura debuts. That's a huge part of this. Minoura debuts. He's the first guy to debut after the split with Shima and company. And so now you've got Minoura, who's pushed heavily and featured heavily out of the gate. You've got Yoshioka and you've got Skywalker, and off in the distance is Hyo. And this gives us the first incarnation of Mochizuki Dojo, which was never an official unit. The idea was that they would learn underneath the guide of Masaki Mochizuki. When they wanted to leave, they could. And this gave all of these guys, and then later Keisuke Ikuta, their first true purpose within Dragon Gate. And so in the summer of 2018, August specifically, Skywalker makes his first venture outside of Dragon Gate as he and Masaki Mochizuki go to All Japan for the Junior Tag Battle of Glory 2018. And I am not paying a ton of attention to All Japan in 2018, but on August 9th in Shinkiba First Ring, they had my undivided attention as we got Kotaro Suzuki and Shuji Kondo against Masaki Mochizuki and Shun Skywalker. And up to this point, one of the only interactions between Kondo and a Dragon Gate wrestler since he left unceremoniously at the end of 2004. This is where Skywalker, as we know him, starts to feel like Skywalker. This match is heated. This match is violent. This match is a lot of abuse directed at Skywalker, and he handles all of it with grace, and he handles all of it excellently. I love this match, and this, I think, spiritually begins the run of dominance that Skywalker had from, say, this point of time through the end of 2025.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating, this period of his career, because you have this happen. This is right as Mochizuki Dojo forms, because they do that 3-on-1 match in the August Cork, and then that's kind of the kickoff for it, and that gets Mochizuki saying, like, yeah, no, okay with this. But if you look back also to what's happening on these shows, Skywalker has gone from basically over a period of a year being either injured in dark matches, but not a whole lot about him outside of that, to be getting like 13-minute matches with Takashi Yoshida back when Takashi Yoshida mattered at a house show. Getting 13 minutes with Ryo Saito. He gets a House of Hardcore Twitch TV title match and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood Heritage title double match against Willie Mack in the September Cork, and he is now at this point. Now that Benkei has been separated, he's been elevated, he's turned heel, he's already his own thing. We're already getting ready and getting him primed for his 2019. Shun Skywalker is the young guy of focus at this point, pretty much until he leaves the promotion for his excursion.
That Willie Mack match is a lot of fun, and this begins this period where Skywalker is now becoming a talking point with you and with me and the people that are watching Dragon Gate at this time. Is, we're in a creative low point. I've compared a lot of 2026 to a lot of the things that were happening towards the end of 2017 and through most of 2018. And in the same way that I think Dragon Gate will eventually get out of their funk now, a lot of the reason they got out of their funk creatively was because of the rise of Skywalker. It was almost very similar.
Mochizuki Dojo was the most exciting thing on the shows when Pac wasn't on them.
You had Mochizuki Dojo, you had Maximum, who I want to talk about a little bit when we get to your first match. But
sure,
you had, in the same way, when Takuma Fujiwara, and you got to remember, Fujiwara was only in Dragon Gate for 6 months, but there started to become that thing with Fujiwara from January of 2022 through June when he left, where it's like, oh, every show this guy's on, he's making better. And it's not just Fujiwara versus Diamante. It's like, oh, Fujiwara's in a 6-man tag with Natural Vibes guys? Well, God, that's probably going to be pretty good. And then you watch and you go, oh my God, that was so much better than I expected. And this is around the time period where you're getting things like Willie Mack versus Shun Skywalker, and you're getting Masaki Mochizuki and Shun Skywalker versus the Bicycle Brothers. You're getting all these things that, like, on paper should kind of be whatever. UT Yamato and Yosuke Santamaria versus Mochi Skywalker and Yoshioka. Like that in theory is a whatever match. But something was happening before our eyes. And you and I, even by this point, had watched enough of this to know, like, oh my God, something is happening here. And it was very similar with Takuma. I feel like it has happened to a very elongated and perhaps frustratingly slow degree with Kame, but with Skywalker, it was a thing. And so the first match that I have, and again we'll have a link to this, but the first match that I want to mention here, the first truly great Skywalker performance is September 24th, 2018, Dangerous Gate of that year. BB Hulk and Yamato defending their Twin Gate belts against Mochi and Shun Skywalker, with the reason being that even though Mochi and Skywalker didn't win the All Japan Junior Tag League, they represented Dragon Gate well, they made the company proud, they're rewarded with a Twin Gate match. And Mike, for the last 8 years, this match has been burned into my brain. I feel like I've rewatched this match probably more than any other match between 2018 and now. I feel like I have so many of the spots permanently ingrained in my brain, and this is one of my favorite Twin Gate matches of all time.
Yeah, and this was a match for me that as I rewatched it, the thing that was so remarkable to me was by September of 2018, the company knew what they had in Shun Skywalker. Maybe I didn't realize it in 2018, but the power of hindsight, especially with the way of how much he ate Yamato and BB Hulk's offense, was given kickouts and near falls and getting huge moments and giving him just opportunities to draw in babyface response is real remarkable. That it's not a response that they would, just because you brought him up, that putting Jackie Kamei at that point of his career in this kind of match that they would have given him after a first Galleria. Jackie Kamei, 2 years in his career, is seeing the lights, and he's probably seeing the lights and getting carried out at this point. Not Shun Skywalker. And rewatching this match, and I should grab my notebook for my thoughts on it in 2018, just to provide that as well after I hand this back to you. It's so clearly a Shun match. Mochizuki's in there. He is guiding traffic. He is making sure that he is there at the right points and the right times. But this match is about really even more so than Shun Skywalker versus Yamahulk. This is Shun Skywalker's first kind of exposure to the guy that really would be the other tentpole throughout his time in the promotion in Yamato. And this is like the first time it's like semi-main event, getting 20 minutes, and you're getting mostly Yamato versus Shun Skywalker.
It's such a raw showcase for Shun in a way that, I can only think of a few other examples throughout history. Baby Shingo got a few of these chances. Yamamura got a few of these chances. Kento probably did, but I can't even think of a specific
He
Kento
kind of
match.
bypassed it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Kento just sort of assimilated into the major booking plan so quickly. But this was such a sink or swim match. And I wrote in 2018, I'll go to my review where I say, Shun Skywalker is not a perfect wrestler. Far from it would be an understatement, honestly. In his past 3 televised matches, he's had a relatively major botch in every one of those matches. I wish it was on a basic chain grappling or for getting to kick out, but all 3 of his botches have been on dives. And for an aerial-based wrestler, that is no good. His sloppiness might have helped create magic, though, as after nearly face-planting from the top rope to the outside on a springboard dive gone awry, Skywalker hit another gear. From that moment on, this match felt different. Mochizuki ramped up and found himself mentally ready for another epic. Skywalker began literally throwing himself at Hulk and Yamato to try to secure the victory, and Yamato and Hulk soon realized that they had to be on their A game if they wanted to retain their Twin Gate belts. This is... If you've only seen Skywalker maybe from Z-Brats on, you owe yourself to watch this match because it's such a far cry from the wrestler that he would turn into. And it's why when he started becoming a main event wrestler, it was so shocking. And even the transition from this to Masquerade is pretty jarring, let alone the Masquerade to Z-Brats transition that we would see with him putting on muscle and slowing down and not flying as much. But he's reckless like Jack Evans in this match, but he's so lanky and so wild and so out of control at times, but it creates a very real feeling, this very visceral feeling that this guy might stumble into winning the Twin Gate belts in a match where he's almost exposed for being not ready, but the more he exposes himself, the more entertaining the match becomes. It's just a really unique match in the history of this promotion. And like I said, it's one of my favorite Twin Gate matches in history.
Yeah, and I'm looking at my notes, and it's all about Yamato versus Shun. It's like I love the heat from Yamato against Shun. Yamato really leaned into being a prick on this. Shun's breakup of the ankle lock was really cool in this. That was a thing here, and yeah, no, it's really remarkable just the style that Shun was willing to work at this time period. And I think a lot of it kind of was youthful exuberance, and as you said, like he evolves past that pretty much after he comes back from Mexico. But it really, at this point, if 2016 was the elevation up from just being a plain rookie to earning your stripes here, this is at this point where after this match, and in comparison to the remainder of his class, this is where he starts lapping everyone else, really, because he's proven that he can be the one that you give the title matches to. He's going to maybe risk disaster, especially on his dives, but you will know that like you trust him much more in that situation than Hyo, and Kota Minoura is not going to be in that situation 2 months into his career. And he, at this point, and as it feeds into the remainder of 2018 into 2019, he becomes the highlighted uh, younger wrestler starting at this point.
So you threw a match at me that I did not have a very strong memory of. This is from just a month and a half later.
Right.
Gate of Destiny 2018, Open the Triangle Gate match. Natural Vibes, Genki Horiguchi, KZ, and Susumu Yokosuka versus Maximum, Jason Lee, Kaito Ishida, and Naruki Doi versus Mochizuki Dojo, Masaki Mochizuki, Shun Skywalker, and Yuki Yoshioka. Mike, why did this match come to mind for you?
For me, this was, I mean, talking about earning stripes, this is him in the Dragon System trademark. And with the way that the match goes, this is not a situation where the young guys get eliminated pretty quickly and then it goes to the established champion team and then the actual kind of challengers. The Mochizuki Dojo only gets eliminated like 3 minutes before the match ends. So you only get like a quick closing stretch between Natural Vibes and Maximum. But for me, this was a match that as I was going through my notebooks, and that's kind of how I did my prep for this, was going through the notebooks, and I like saw that I had this in 2018 as the best match on the show. I like this more than Yoshino versus Benkei, which I am looking at the inmates and they disagree with me on this, but I thought Skywalker in this kind of format was kind of special rewatching this match. I thought that seeing him in a 3-way 6-man doing all the trademarks and getting to the certain spots and the way that he would work with Ishida in this match was really, really kind of special. And I mean, it's nice to see Yuki Yoshioka at this point being able to deliver on a stage, even though he's not the topic of that there. That was kind of like an added bonus for me. And I thought that at least for like where Mochizuki Dojo was in 2018, this was kind of like the idea of it more put on display rather than Mochizuki and Shun Skywalker pretty much teamed all over the last half of that year when there was the anniversary of Baba's passing, when there was that All Japan show at Sumo Hall. It was Mochizuki and Shun Skywalker as the Dragon Gate guys there for it. Like that was kind of an established thing, but getting a chance to see like a Mochizuki Dojo as Mochizuki Dojo with more than that, I thought was kind of a fun thing to revisit tonight.
Yeah, it's the first great Yoshioka performance. I mean, he's excellent. This is a match that I had completely forgotten about, but it's a match that I loved. I actually rated it slightly higher on rewatch than I did in real time. I went 4.5 in real. I'm sorry, I went 4.25 in real time, 4.5 on rewatch. In my written review in 2018, I spent this whole review raving about Kaito Ishida and how this was the coming out performance for Ishida that we had all desperately wanted for so long. And that saddened me because watching Maximum, and I don't want to get too far off the beaten path here because we're already going pretty long, but everything that Maximum did in this match and everything that Maximum was should just be what Love and Peace is. And Ishida should be Mochizuki Jr., and they have a Doi Yoshi and Kame and Rita. You literally have Ben K in the same unit. It just kills me that Love and Peace will probably end soon. and they got nothing out of it. It's devastating because Maximum in this match were incredible. There's some KZ and Doi stuff down the stretch that is so intricate and so well timed and so engaging. But the Mochizuki Dojo stuff, it's an awesome Shun match. It's an awesome Yoshioka match. Masaki Mochizuki plays his role perfectly. I'm very glad you wrecked this because I did not remember this match and I really loved it on rewatch.
Yeah, I was 4.25 in 2018. I was 4.5 in 2016. I just thought that this was a really kind of great display, and you got to see kind of the hints on pay-per-view for something that we've talked about next in his career that we covered in a rewind and rewatch series. In total, this was kind of the things that kicked us into gear for the rookie ranking league that would kick off 2019 for them.
Yes, so that really all begins on December 4th, 2018, where you get in the middle of this Cork and Hall show that has Pac versus Yoshino headlining. You get a 20-minute time limit draw between Skywalker and UT. And we covered all of this on a podcast that I think was 2 years ago. I loved that show. We went super, super deep on this stuff. I would highly recommend everybody go back and give that a listen. But there's a 20-minute time limit draw between Skywalker and UT that is a red flag for a number of reasons. But it kicks off this run from an in-ring perspective and from a booking perspective that, as a fan and as somebody that's analyzed this promotion now for over a decade, this little self-contained stretch of everything that Skywalker does from UT to KZ at Kobe World is just some of my favorite stuff. And I could sink my teeth into this stuff and relive this stuff and kick my feet up and rewatch this stuff all day long. So December 4th, 2018, you get the 20-minute time limit draw against UT. When shows begin in 2019, you get the rookie ranking tournament where Skywalker beats Dai and KBS Hall, Yoshioka and Osaka number 2. And then in the finals, he and Kaito Ishida have a stone cold classic rookie ranking tournament finals match. The end of that month, they do a 6-man tournament in Kobe Sambo Hall. Don't skip over this match. Ishida, Yoshino, and Doi versus Hyo, Skywalker, and Yoshioka. 14-minute trios match. It's unbelievably great. You go into February, and Ben K at this point, you got to remember, Ben K's 5 months away from beating Pac for the Dreamgate title. He's still a heel, but he's super protected. Ben K does not lose to people at this point. Shun goes from beating Ishida and Cork and Hall to beating Ben K clean, middle of the ring in Cork and Hall at that February 2019 Corkin. And all of a sudden, we go from, hey, this Shun thing is pretty fun. Maybe he'll get a Bravegate match out of this. I think the Bravegate champion at the time was Dragon Kid. I was like, maybe they do Shun versus Dragon Kid. Wrong. We set up Shun versus Pac for Champion Gate Night 2 in Osaka, which is the next match that I sent you, Mike. And I just wanted to watch this in 2026 eyes because in real time, this was all happening so quickly. And the expectation, I wrote an article previewing this match. That's how into all of this I was. I knew that Shun was going to lose. It was okay that Shun was going to lose. It was elevating him to say that it's okay for Shun to main event shows like this and to be in Dreamgate matches. He's going to get his ass kicked. But you know what? They kind of have a main eventer on their hands. And it all happened so quickly. This is a guy going to a 20-minute time limit draw with UT in December. Now he's at the Dreamgate scene in March. And before you know it, they have a guy. And this Pac match is nowhere near as great as the KZ match, but goddamn, this match is great. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and it all really builds up of what Pac was doing in his return run with Dragon Gate, where he attacks Yoshino on that cork, and during the back when Dragon Gate would do the national anthems before title matches, he attacked him during God Save the Queen. And from that point, he bum rushed him, won the belt, and said, "All right, I'm going home. There's not going to be a title defense at Final Gate." So this was Pac's first title defense, was against Skywalker. And
he beats Yoshino for the belt, and then so KZ is the first title defense. So this is the second.
Sorry, KZ was that was February Final Star Lanes match. I know that I wrote a newsletter about that.
Yeah, so
match.
sorry. The whole thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just getting that kind of twisted up in my head there for a second. But so second title defense and Shun Skywalker during the anthem, and maybe it is that he's in the blue corner since he's a challenger and he's able to keep his eyes on Pac in the way that Yoshino wasn't able to, but his eyes do not go off him during the entire start. And then from there, it's off to the races. And you have Pac and Skywalker do this opening exchange. That's not an uncommon opening exchange. It's basically getting to a point where you do that, where you're basically able to miss everyone's moves. You're showing your athleticism. You do the kip up and face off, and then Pac immediately bulldogs it or gets right into his face like a bulldog, going like, "Yeah, you're a flying guy, but guess what? I am. I'm Pac. I can do everything." And it is just really like the work Pac did in this title run is something that I think, well, we thought about it at the time, but now 7 years later, he really, I mean, the best work of his career was setting up all these guys that he did in these title matches. And after this match, not only was Shun Skywalker a guy, Shun Skywalker has the cleanest match of his career against Pac. He had the cleanest plancha. He hits the best K Brada version of it. And it's just both the guys going for it, and Pac is just as precise as he is. And honestly, as I'm like watching this in 2026, I'm going like, all right, we have Pac, who I did the mini mixtape on a couple months ago. He's my favorite current wrestler right now, and like at like the point where he was doing the matches he wanted to do, and he had really a match where it was just a textbook Pac match, and in the same way it was a textbook 2019 Shun Skywalker match. You have the Spanish fly into a Skywalker moonsault that starts off this masterful closing stretch where Shun unloads his entire clip. He goes for Ashlab, then he goes for the moonsault knees, and then he goes for the second Skywalker moonsault. Pac gets his knees up. He then does the moonsault double knees to prove a point to young Skywalker on who is here and who is there, and then lands the black arrow to retain. And if we had that first step in 2016, the next step in 2018, he's being promoted up the ladder now to this point that honestly, as we turn deeper into 2019, it did feel like that it was very clear that it was going to be Pac. It was going to be Pac dropping the title to Benkei. Like it felt predestined, pretty much like starting the spring of that year. But the undercurrent was, where is Shun Skywalker going to be before this year closes? And coming into that spring and coming out of that title match, he shakes everything up. And I'll take the wheel for a second. After this match, he goes into the cage, escapes the cage, and kicks himself out of Mochizuki Dojo. And now he is a lone wolf. He is lightly affiliated with Benkei. I think I have a Shun and Benkei button somewhere on my desks that I need to go look at. But you then have Shun Skywalker as his own person, and seeing how that last, really 8 months took him from a place where he was just bursting out from like being an established rookie to now being one of the hottest acts on the roster as we get into King of Gate season in 2019.
I'm so glad you went move by move over that finishing stretch with Pac and Skywalker, because I was going to do the same. Because watching Pac do the double knee moonsault onto Shun before the black arrow, I was like, oh my god, this guy's an all-time great. It's so great.
I'm sorry to tell folks, but Pac is probably, like, if we're talking about the last 20 years in ring and just keeping it in ring, he probably needs to be reassessed and considered. Maybe not to the same level as your Kazuchika Okada's, but boy, I mean, as soon as he hits Dragon Gate to present, I think this guy is one of the best wrestlers in the world pretty consistently every year that he's actually wrestling.
Best TV wrestler the entire time he was in WWE. So just to put a bow on Skywalker's 2019, far be it from me to even try to pretend to analyze 2026 WWE, but I'm aware of the Obafemi Brock Lesnar story, and I was aware of the pushback when Lesnar returned and then beat Obafemi, that people were giving it to let it play out, and it's okay, this guy loses, and wins and losses don't matter, whatever excuse they wanted to give. You see the power of what happens. It's unfortunate this is a lesson in 2026, but Shun Skywalker just won a bunch, and it was a slight elevation with the UT thing. It was like, 20-minute time limit draw, there's something here. And then he beats Yoshioka. Daya meant nothing at that point, but it's like, he beats Yoshioka. Okay, that's something. Oh, he beat Yoshida. He beat Kaito Ishida. Okay, so he's above Kaito Ishida now. And then all he had to do was beat Benkei clean. It was like, holy shit, we're on to something here. And then the Pac match happens. He leaves Mochizuki Dojo at the end of the cage match. You had sent the link to May 9th, 2019, Skywalker versus Mochizuki. I think this is a sneaky all-time great Dragon Gate match. This was my number 10 match at Voices of Wrestling Match of the Year poll that year. I have talked about this match at length before, but Mike, your thoughts with 2026 eyes, Skywalker versus Mochizuki.
God, I had it 4.25 in 2019. I have it 4.5 now.
Mhm.
It is just like something about the Twin Gate match that I didn't mention because it was so much about Skywalker versus the Stars was Mochizuki in 2018 is so much meaner than he is now. Like in a way, you can kind of see how he's aged, and not saying that he is checked out or is letting his mouth do a lot of the work these days, but boy, 2018, 2019, Mochizuki could turn on being pissed like no other wrestler. And like just doing things like like Shun goes for his slingshot tope over the top rope and it goes right into a kick in the gut. And you're just like, this is just a incredibly mean match. And it feels like that this match and this win for Shun Skywalker would kick off King of Gate with a win, is kind of like, if we're doing this and treating this like a shoot, this is his high water mark for 2019 after losing the Pac match, because the rest of his year, there's not a whole lot to talk about, and that was intentional. But the way that he would completely kind of, in a way, be like a Mochizuki killer in this match, and I think like that at this time and place, this was the exact right match for these two to do, because you couldn't, well, like a Skywalker in 2021 match versus Masaki Mochizuki in 2019, even with how great they are, would not have that layer of pissed offness that Mochizuki did, because he felt like Skywalker kind of pulled a fast one by electing to leave Mochizuki Dojo by cage by a cage stipulation rather than telling him to his face that he's out. And it just was such a real like testament to Skywalker, and Skywalker getting this win here was the win that really, for this tournament in 2019, it was the Benkei tournament. He wins the tournament without dropping a fall, and he does a clean sweep throughout it. But you don't talk about that. What you talk about from King of Gate 2019 is the opening night match on May 9th, 2019 of Masaki Mochizuki versus Shun Skywalker, because it is a brilliant piece of work.
And then from there, I think the one other thing we need to hit on in 2019, because after this match happens, I would say that Skywalker to some degree purposefully gets lost in the booking. You know, the last half of that year is him and Ben, not in a unit, but as a tag team. Ben is Dreamgate champion. Skywalker is both a partner and somebody at odds with Ben. It's clear that he wants the Dreamgate belt, but is maybe not on the level of Ben K anymore now that Ben has turned his back on RED. It was a babyface singles champion. But you have this KZ versus Skywalker match at Kobe World 2019. And by this point, you know, KZ's coming off of the Pac match. Skywalker's got all the momentum he has. Two of the best wrestlers in the company at this point, who at this point in time had no real history with one another. And they're on the undercard of this Kobe World show, first Dragon Gate show with English commentary. A lot of eyeballs on this show. Pac in the main event against Ben K. And the takeaway from this show was that not Pac, but KZ and Shun Skywalker stole the show. And I'm not sure that Skywalker is pushed as aggressively upon return and as aggressively as he is through the end of 2025 if it's not for this match. Because up until this point, it was like, okay, he got hot. They told a nice story. He had a nice run. After King of Gate, he didn't have an obvious Kobe World match. And if this match would have just been good, I think a lot of the focus could have been shifted away from Shun Skywalker. Instead, they have the best match on the show, and it becomes undeniable at this point that Skywalker's now an elite tier talent.
Yeah, no, like I had a list of about 8 matches, Case, that I tried to cut off. This was one of the matches that I chose not to do. This was like one of the last cuts. My other matches that I was going to do was 2-5-19. I was going to do the Kaito Ishida Dreamgate match, but I didn't know if I wanted to do an empty arena Dreamgate match, and I was going to do Speedstar Final, but I chose not to because I thought that you know, the encapsulation of it was better by the matches we chose for it. But this match, I have my notes up from that time. I haven't rewatched it in a couple of years. I really should probably make some time for, but it also was like the fact that you had this match after Hongman Choi versus Stalker Chikawa and Ryo Saito, that like you needed something really big here. And on a show that, I mean, like it was all about crowning Benkei as the star, that felt like that he could be the ace that was promised, but then he opened his mouth and we realized no, he was not the ace that was promised here. And like this Kobe World in 2019, you have Ultimo's return on it, you have an incredible three-way twin gate match, but like this special singles match, I think KZ won like he got like a year supply of like bug repellent for winning. Was just like one of those things from this show that after this point, Skywalker goes on a losing streak and then leaves at the end of 2019 to go on excursion. Like this is it for him for the year.
And so I don't want to spend a ton of time on his excursion right now, just because again, I kind of want to hurry this along to get to the
Yeah.
questions. But Skywalker comes back in 2020 after being in Mexico, essentially getting there and the pandemic happening, and he and Yoshioka are just off in the wilderness for a little bit. It was always very exciting to go on the Mas Lucha YouTube channel and see that, oh, weird, we have Shun Skywalker footage to watch, but it was
from IWRG, and like, there's no one there.
Yeah, or some, there was some DTU stuff that made tape there, or there was like a Fuerza Guerrera tag on an indie show that I remember. It was just like, oh, okay, this is all so bizarre and so uncomfortable. But Skywalker comes back at Gate of Destiny after a Eita KZ Dreamgate match. And this was not one of the, we had no idea when Skywalker was going to come back, and we had no idea how he was going to be used, because he actually very successfully pulled off the out of sight, out of mind excursion, because not only was so much happening in the world, but 2020, even with the pandemic, was such a busy time for Dragon Gate, and there were so many new guys in the mix, and it was a promotion that, I always point to. The box office for Dragon Gate in January and February of 2020 is much stronger than people realize. And this was a promotion that had momentum going into COVID. They handled the initial COVID shift to empty arena wrestling better than anybody else. And I still think very fondly of 2020 and 2021 Dragon Gate, in part because after Eita versus KZ, Shun comes back. The schedule is all screwed up, so they do Gate of Destiny on November 3rd. Kobe World that year, November 15th, a 2-week turnaround from Eita and KZ to Eita and Shun. He wins that belt. And then at the beginning of December, 2 weeks later, Hokkaido triple shot, we are introduced to Masquerade. And to this day, for whatever reason, this December 2020, deep in the throes of COVID, Hokkaido triple shot that featured the beginning of Masquerade, one of my favorite triple shots Dragon Gate has ever done. I loved these episodes of TV. I loved the Daya, Jason, Minoru, Skywalker quartet. Estrella would get added to that unit on December 15th in Cork and Hall. That was the official Masquerade debut. And Skywalker's off to the races. What were your initial memories of Masquerade? I mean, we're doing shows weekly at this point. We're talking about it in real time. You go back and listen to the archives. But I guess with the benefit of hindsight, Masquerade felt like a massive deal and ended up becoming a massive deal.
Yeah, like the one thing that I keep on going back to with Masquerade was a big deal that was much more heavily weighted towards its in-ring product than it ever was as a character presence, and that's why it kind of ended up being kind of what it was, because Skywalker as a babyface, and that's something that we'll talk about when we get into questions, was a different thing than what we saw after 12/1/21 when he lost his mind. And it was not a necessarily what I would call, and I know that we might be of divergence appearance here, it's not a overwhelming success of a superface unit. It was a very stylized unit with guys that I think coming out of it, with the exception of Estrella, they all were a lot better off for being into it. But it was not a World One. It was not a Monster Express. It was a lot closer to kind of a Millennials. And I think that the big testament of the unit was that whenever you got a combination of the five guys into the ring, for whatever reason, they had the best chemistry with whatever opponents they had versus any other team that you could have in the promotion in 2020 and 2021. Like as long as you had Skywalker, Daya, Minoru, and Lee, and sometimes Estrella, you were guaranteed to at least have one match on a show that was probably at the very worst 3.5 stars. And it kind of leads me to one of my matches as we get into 2021. We didn't choose any of his babyface Dreamgate title matches in on this. We talked about those a lot in time, and you can go back and revisit those. I chose a match because I wanted to figure out, was there a just landmark RED versus Masquerade match? Because that was our conversations really back in the day, was this the RED versus Masquerade. If they ever come back in the States, they got to run RED versus Masquerade. It's always the best thing on the shows. But we didn't really have like one of the like trademark
We didn't
matches.
have a
Like you,
definitive match. These
yeah.
guys, for those that weren't watching in 2021,
Mhm.
RED and Masquerade wrestled on almost every show. They crushed it on almost every show. I do not have a multi-man match between RED and Masquerade higher than 4.25. I have a lot of them at 4.25 and 4 and 3 3/4. They were all super entertaining, but there was never a definitive, this is the one that everybody has to watch. This is why this feud is so great, multi-man match. There were great singles matches, Skywalker versus
Right.
Shida, Skywalker versus Kazuma Sakamoto. There was never that defining multi-man match. I was surprised that you picked this one.
This is the one, at least according to my notebooks, was because Skywalker was doing main event things as Dreamgate champion. He was not always in the RED versus Masquerade match. This was the one, at least when I was flipping through it, seemed like one of the more interesting ones that had people like Monte that would become so much more of a figure for him in the Z-Brats days. And I think I had to go back completely through all my notes to make sure this was one of the ones that was my highest rated one that I had, at least for a moment. So I chose from August 8th, 2021. This is from Kobe Sambo Hall. Masquerade, Shun Skywalker, Dragon Dia, and La Estrella versus Eita, Monte, and Hio. And it was a maybe not the best choice for mine, maybe, but I really enjoyed it.
It's good. I have it in my notebook at 4. I would still probably give it that rating, but there's
Right.
a few other ones between these two teams that I liked more.
Yeah, I thought that this was going to be my case for what would be the best one, but for me, the finish is like the big thing, stark thing about it is how much better of a heel unit RED is than Gacha
Oh
Tokoro.
God, I had that feeling watching the Pac Skywalker match when there's no referee interference, and I was
Yeah,
just like, oh God, this is so nice, and this is so much better.
yeah. Well, what does RED do as a heel unit? Okay, they isolate and then they distract the referee so they can beat down Dia or Shun Skywalker. Shun Skywalker actually is the babyface in peril in this match, which is kind of interesting here. And then the finishing stretch is just it is just Ishida tripping someone on the side and getting away with it, and then Hio getting a crucifix. Just a clean heel unit that feels right.
It's a fun match to watch because it only happened 6 years ago, but
It's a lifetime.
between Skywalker's look, between Hyo's look, between Daya's look, between Diamante's look, and the fact that Estrella and Eita are in this match might as well have taken place 100 years ago.
Yeah, especially like 2021 Hio. I know I have a big soft spot for Hio, and I think that watching this, I'm like, maybe he's a little bit closer to where he is today in 2021 here, but it's I would have been intrigued to see what would happen if they reran Masquerade again, or if you give them a chance to redraft and maybe put it into 2023, like some way where it's not a COVID unit, because I do wonder, like, one of the entanglements of it is on a COVID show, quiet crowds until 2022, that entrance felt like it always took forever. And I wonder if you had a crowd that could respond to it, that they could actually like play to in the crowd and interact with, would have made it feel a little bit more of a hot unit than it was, which is really, to me, like you said, love and peace. And I think that's the greatest opinion for them, because it was like the work rate, the babyface work rate unit, and not more than that to me.
The 2 points I want to make before we get to our final match, and then I think from there we can pivot to questions, because my final match ties into Skywalker's heel turn and Z-Brats. That gets into more modern history. We've written and discussed that stuff at length. I'm happy to answer any further questions
Mhm.
about Skywalker from there, but I want to get to these questions because I'm going to have to wrap up here at some point.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
But the 2 points I want to make about Masquerade. Mike banged this drum much harder than I did. I was never fully in alignment with him, but I always understood where he was coming from. And this is important to note as we get into my final match and the legacy of Skywalker, and especially the stuff that he had with Z-Brats, is that The prevailing thought at the time was that Masquerade, like you said, is a great babyface work rate unit, but that Skywalker lacks the definitive main event charisma and promo skills to be the 1A guy of this promotion. And that was not a hot take. That was not hyperbolic. I had my disagreements with it, but in real time, before Skywalker's heel turn, that was the way Masquerade was thought of. And that has to be noted once again.
Yeah, and it just was not it was just not easy for him also, because when you like contrast that with World 1, you had other people that can pick up the microphone there. You contrast that with the Jimmies, and Susumu is not known as this super charismatic talker, but he had Ryo Saito and Genki Horiguchi there that could always bring everyone home for that. You just didn't have that, and I think that on that aspect of it, and I still believe this full chest out, kind of set the unit ceiling what it was when you had two guys who didn't talk, in Daya and Estrella, Kota Minoura, who's still not a great promo to be quite honest, and Jason Lee, who Japanese might be his third language. So like, or it might not be, but it is a second or third language for him for it. Like there was no help for Shun with that, and I think that it put that ceiling on it pretty firmly.
Yeah. The other thing I got to know is that when the history books are written, and it will be you and I writing these history books, but it has to be noted. We did this Dreamgate exercise like 6 months ago where you and I tiered all of the Dreamgate reigns in history, and the Skywalker one from 2021 came out as one of the best Dreamgate runs in history. There is this idea that Skywalker's 2021 Dreamgate reign was not an all-time great run. And that is because during his first defense, Final Gate 2020 against Ben K, one, it came directly after the Toryumon Generation versus RED unit disbands match. And even in front of a clap crowd, you could tell that crowd was exhausted in a good way by what they had just seen, but completely exhausted from the match before. And two, Ben K got legitimately knocked out towards the finish. Skywalker hit an offensive maneuver on him after he got knocked out. And then the referee botched the pinfall count. It went everywhere. A bunch of people that don't watch Dragon and don't know what they're talking about decide to have an opinion on a bunch of Southern indie bums that I don't give a shit about and never will because they've never done anything with their lives. But the Ben K match got a certain level of attention. And then after the Ishida match and after the Sakamoto match, there was the 4-minute Madoka Kikuta shoulder injury debacle Dreamgate match from Dead or Alive 2021. The Ben K match was on its way to being a legitimately great match before he got knocked out.
It was 4.5-star match that was marred by the last 40 seconds.
Exactly. The Kikuta match is such a historical oddity. And I think maybe the worst part of Skywalker leaving is that we now will lose the history between Kikuta and Skywalker because their Dreamgate history is Dead or Alive 2021, Kikuta gets hurt. Dead or Alive 2023, Kikuta beats Skywalker for the title after his first defense against Strong Machine J. And Dangerous Gate 2025, Kikuta defeats Skywalker in his first defense. They had a fascinating run of Dreamgate matches between the oddity of 2021, the match of the year contender in 2023, and whatever that 2025 match was. But nevertheless, there was history there that we won't be able to get to now. But the Ben K match, the Ishida match, the Sakamoto match, the KZ match, the Yamato match, guys, it's an all-time great Dreamgate run. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise.
As a complete aside case, did you know that Shun deleted all of his tweets?
I did not know that.
Yep, just discover that right now.
So he loses the belt to Yamato. I've talked at length about this. There was so much conversation in the summer of 2021 about should KZ beat Skywalker and then lose to Yamato? Should KZ beat Skywalker and then beat Yamato? Should Skywalker beat both guys? Should he beat KZ and then lose to Yamato? And that's exactly what ended up happening. So Skywalker loses the belt in the summer of 2021. And that is when we start to see the dissension of Masquerade. And we start to see Skywalker be cold to his teammates. We start to see him not be all there. We start to see him sort of expand his charisma into something that we had never really seen before. And that takes us to 12/1/21, 5 years to the day after 12/1/16. Daya Inferno and Diamante versus Dragon Daya and Shun Skywalker. I had not rewatched this match since it happened. In the moment,
Same.
I called this match a brilliant storytelling match. The hodgepodge of storytelling and in-ring action resulted in a flawed, albeit thrilling main event with one of the most shocking finishes in Dragon Gate history. Even with the clap crowd and a half-full Korakuen, there was something about this match that, to me, Mike, is utterly electric.
Yeah, and I think it really, like, you have to watch the entrance of Masquerade, and you have to see the way that Shun plays off it. Like, he gives like one, like in retrospect, one of the most insincere side hugs ever, and they pose. But the one thing that goes through my mind almost 5 years later is, Shun, you fucker, I know what you're about to do in 20 minutes. I know what's about to happen, and it actually kind of adds a level of trauma to it that actually I think makes this viewing stronger than it was in the moment. I was 4 flat on it back in 2021. I'd probably be 4.25, maybe 4.5 for the angle, just because of how powerful it all was. And it's just like such a interesting match because everyone's banned from ringside. RED tries to slide in, and Ryo Saito, doing actual good general management, goes out there and goes, no, we're not doing this. This is going to be these 4 guys. And they kind of go through the ringer with it, and it is like so fascinating, like the way the matches worked, about how like Daya gets basically destroyed for 10 minutes, and then there is the big monkey flip that gets that Shun Skywalker does, and it kind of spins things around here. Shun or Diamante does like this wild abdominal stretch out of a Tijeras that's not exactly super clean, but it's really kind of fun to see. And then, yeah, I mean, it's all about the finishing stretch. It's all about Daya trying to get a step in at a point where Skywalker had taken a lot of damage, and Daya was trying to kind of do this. Skywalker's mask gets shoved to the side. I forgot about the mask getting shoved to the side. That was something over 5 years that did not imprint as much as I thought it would. And then he claims that Skywalker couldn't see Daya, but he shoves him into Diamante, who does a Vuelta finale, pins him for 3, and then afterwards you have Daya bawling his eyes out, ripping off his mask, SB Kento trying to lord it all over him, trying to just be the cocky prick that he was, and then Daya Inferno unmasking himself after all the while that Shun Skywalker said Daya Inferno was not Yuki Yoshioka, unmasking himself as Yuki Yoshioka, saying my duty here is done. And then from that moment, we got the modern era of Dragon Gate. From that match, we got D-Courage, we got Z-Brats, we got everything that went on from there. We got Monte losing his match to Shun Skywalker finally getting too high on his own supply and getting kicked out of Z-Brats, having Hamare, and it all branches off really from this one match in 2021.
Just as I scroll through the cage match here, I'm reminded of the Skywalker versus KZ match in King of Gate 2022 in Osaka #2, and what a special match that was. I am reminded of Skywalker versus Yoshioka for the Dreamgate belt in 2023, and how I think I like that match more than any other human on the planet, but how I love that match, and I specifically love Skywalker's performance there. That leads into the layup of all layups, Kakuta defeating Skywalker at Dead or Alive 2023. As you go forward, Z-Brats just become such a well-oiled heel unit. I think they do such marvelous work. You get a number of great Z-Brats versus Kame matches. You get Skywalker versus Kakuta from Gate of Bayside and the special match that was. You get to see Skywalker in America starting in 2022 and go through all these promotions, some of which, quite frankly, he was above, and yet he worked hard in all these promotions. He had really great matches in a lot of these promotions, very entertaining stuff there. And then you get to Hamare in 2024, and you get to Rey de Parejas in 2025, and you get to him versus Yamato at World last year in what felt like the biggest match of the era. And really, and I always think this is worth bringing up, again, I said at the start of this podcast, for SFM 50 voting, I had this guy from 2021 to 2025, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 3rd. And that 3rd in 2025 might surprise people, but I had Skywalker with a total of 22 matches at 4 stars or higher last year, including 2 matches at 4 3/4, Skywalker versus Yamato in the Pro Wrestling Revolution 6-man tag, and a number of 4.5-star matches as well. This guy was great through the end of 2025. Cy Patra in November of 2025 looked like a stone cold lock to be a great unit. And it wasn't until the Hamare shoulder injury and the vacation of the Triangle Gate belts that they started to sputter. And by the time we turned the clock to this year, things looked a little dodgy. He had the Shimizu match in Corkin that was really entertaining. But once Shimizu got hurt and the build to Golden Coliseum fell apart, Skywalker, for whatever reason, was never treated the same and never was the same in this promotion. And we have now hit a point where we're at the end, as we know it, of Shun Skywalker's Dragon Gate career.
Yeah, it's still kind of, in a way, still it's still soaking into me, 2 months later. And then, of course, a week after his actual exit. And I think at this point, let's get to the questions. We got a good bit. First questions are from actual former Open the Voice Gate host and now host of Wrestling and Wakaze, John Carroll. 3 questions. What kind of career are we talking about for Shun if he never turned heel? Obviously impossible to know for sure, but would love to know if any of you had any guesses. Case, do you have a thought on this one first?
I'm very glad we lived in a timeline in which he did turn heel. I love babyface Skywalker, as we'll address in just a second. I'm devastated we didn't get a second go-around of babyface Skywalker, but the Shun portfolio from 2022 to 2024 is absurd. And he did that, oftentimes as the best heel in wrestling. I called him the modern day Nick Bockwinkel, which is not a comparison that I make lightly. But I thought Skywalker as a heel developed a knack to, one, understand his character so deeply and so thoroughly in a way that was very engaging for the entire audience. But he had this ability to, if he's wrestling Benkei, KZ, Yamato, rise to the occasion and look every bit on their level. And if he's wrestling Punch Tamanaga, Problem Dragon, Konamami Chikawa, it's not that he lowers himself to go to their level. He had this ability to bring them up to a place of legitimate competition. And I always thought that was such a special and unique tool that more heels need to have. Skywalker had it. I think his career, if he just would have done Masquerade for years and years and years, would have been great. I'm very glad we got what we got, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big question about him is, does Shun actually have top of the line as it relates to Dragon system? Is he a top of the line ace babyface? And I don't know if he doesn't go through the heel turn in the last 5 years. I don't know if that's on the table. I think if he remains where he was, like, he needed the creativity of Z-Brats. He needed the heel turn. He needed to scratch that itch to get to that level of charisma. I think that he was incredible and one of my favorite in-ring wrestlers up until 2021. But as 2022 happened, things became different. Okay, so we were together in Vegas last year at WrestleMania weekend, and it was the first time that I saw Shun Skywalker live, and it gave a feeling and a presence to me, at least seeing him in that incarnation that very few wrestlers have ever kind of imprinted on me.
Oh yeah,
and
I mean, again, by the end of the Z-Brats run, they had a system and a formula down to where if they wanted to have a great multi-man match, it kind of didn't matter who their opponents were. I mean, we saw them on that Texas Wrestling Cartel show drag some green Texas indie wrestlers to not a great match, but a thoroughly entertaining match, and easily the best thing they had done up to that point in their careers. And that was under the Skywalker mindset and formula, and we got to see Shun really come into his own as that heel leader there. My favorite Shun stuff by and large is what he did in Masquerade. That year that we got of him there and the 2019 stuff. If I was making a Shun Skywalker 10 best matches comp, probably 60% of them are going to come from 2019 or 2021. But the heel run made him what he is today.
Right. John's next question. Let's just assume Shun's going to New Japan and also joining House of Torture. Is there any way for that to be good in your opinion?
No.
Can he be the... not really for me either. Can he be the thing that turns an insanely reviled unit among Western fans around? Probably not with the way that they operate in the heel unit, personally, for me. Or is the best case scenario simply something like Shun joins House of September but kicks out Ren Narita and takes over the leader after wrestling him in January and finally rebrands the unit with a new name and image? That this is going to come off as a non-answer, but I think everyone will understand what I'm saying. Who's to say that he's coming into the promotion as Shun Skywalker to begin with?
My
I
answer to
think
that is, assuming he comes in as Shun Skywalker, I have such a fundamental disagreement with the way that New Japan does so much stuff right now. And I say that as somebody who's slowly making their way through the G1 and enjoying some of it, enjoying a lot of it. You know, I'm very selective in what I watch. There's even some well thought of New Japan heavyweights that right now I'm not going to take time out of my day to watch them.
Tell me.
But
I want to know. Oh, we're an hour two. Tell me.
I'll say this. I watched Zack Sabre Jr. versus Yuya Uemura, which had a very high cage match rating.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was Zack Sabre Jr. wrestling a broom and getting a 4-star match out of a broom. In essence, it's one of the most impressive Sabre matches I've ever seen, because I don't think anything of Uemura. But if Shun is Shun, or if he's something else and he goes to House of Torture, I just don't see how I will enjoy that. I will give it a shot. I will invest in it in a way that will probably pain me to do. I just don't see how that's going to be any good, even with as talented as Shun is.
How can the after eating the absolute greatest cheeseburger in the world, McDonald's taste to you? That's kind of how I feel about Shun and House of Torture.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair.
All right, John's last question. Did you always assume that Shun was going to get the big babyface run at the end of this? Are you really surprised it turned out this way? No real face turn, he just leaves. Or were there parallels with how Shingo basically left GG right at the end of his biggest heel run in 2018 strong enough that he thought it might go down like this? I'm going to pair this question case just so that we can kind of cover things once into this. With Lior's question is, do you think Shun Skywalker's booking from 2025 up to last week was more influenced by the company or by Shun himself? I think that Shun has a level of control in his character and his booking. I think that's pretty clear if you watch him versus really if you watch Saipatra, that became clear that this was a kind of a Shun thing. I think that if the company had its way, there would have been the Shun big babyface run. Y'all know I'm a Dragon System traditionalist. That's how things go. Hulk had his run in 2014 that way. Yamato had his run in 2016 that way. It was time for Shun's run in 2025. I think that he was only interested in kind of doing Shun things for the last 13 months of his career in Dragon Gate. I mean, really dating back to his when he made that challenge to Yamato and decided by himself saying, if I don't win, I lose. Like, there's an argument to be made that he kind of has been booking the way that he's done for a long time. I don't know specifically if Shun has all the power in his booking, but with the way that things came off, with the power of hindsight, it sure felt like he did.
Based on vague conversations that I've had with people over the last 8 or 9 months, I think there was a lot of "that's not going to work for me, brother" with Shun Skywalker. A lot of "what if we did this" met with "well, we're going to do this instead," which is super disappointing. To answer John's question, we did that show in November with Saipatra, where it was right after they won the Triangle Gate belts, where I was very keen on, if Saipatra is going to work, they have to be a super babyface unit. Skywalker, and they can tell how whatever story they want to tell to get there. But it has to be a unit that ends with Skywalker high-fiving children. They don't need to be the Gong Kid unit. They don't need to be Natural Vibes. They don't need to be Love and Peace. But they have to be objective baby faces for this unit to work. And that's not what happened. And that's devastating, because Skywalker, I think, would have been killer, would have been money as an ultra baby face at some point down the line. I wrote this in my review for this last Ray Day Pareja show. I'll read it again here. Skywalker leaves years worth of unknown matches and angles against the likes of Ben K, Hyo, Jackie Kame, Kazuma Komura, KZ, Luis Monte, Rita, Strong Machine J, and of course, Hamare. Those are names that have direct storylines and angles and consequences and moments in history with Shun that we will now not see evolve. And I don't even have Jason Lee on that list. Jason should be on that list as well. Not having a babyface Skywalker run takes away the next evolution of Ben and Hyo and Jackie and Jason and Kimura and KZ and Monte and Kikuta and Rita and Strong Machine J and Hamare. And that really sucks.
And you didn't even mention Yuki Yoshioka, too.
Yes, you're exactly right.
But like, yeah, no, like so much of what the company could have run with was taken off the table, and taken off, I think, because of a lot of issues with how the company operates. And Shun clearly is a very creative guy. It's just that this company was not the company that could filter him at a certain point, I feel like.
Yes, I had my concerns after the Madoka Kikuta match at Dangerous Gate last year, and my concerns turned out to be exactly what I should be concerned
You were
about.
absolutely right about this.
It's the worst victory lap I have to take. I was absolutely right that something about that match fell off. It was no different than the AEW Dynamite from 2023 with Omega and Vikingo, where Joe Lanza said, something's not right here. Something is off. Something is happening. And I watched Shun versus Kikuta, and I said, something is off. Something is happening. And here we are now 12 months later.
Yeah. You know who was a big longtime heel in Dragon Gate that became such a bigger babyface because everyone wanted to cheer him, and then when he became a babyface, even though he had heel runs afterwards, he was always able to be that big babyface? That was
Who's that?
Shima.
Yes.
I'm not saying Shun Skywalker is Shima, but I am saying that like having someone that at least like maybe I feel like I am a little bit more of the belief that this is more the last year was more Shun based than you are maybe case, but like boy, so much was left on the table in that way. Moving on, Jamie OD of Dramatic DDT asked us, was Shun's reputation amongst fans permanently hampered by his first Dreamgate run, particularly when he injured Ben K?
Not that I know of.
I don't think so. I think that, as you said, like the people whose opinions should be discounted probably had an opinion of Shun Skywalker being too dangerous. I know that there are some people.
No, they weren't watching anyway. They don't matter.
Yeah. And I think that like really like the situations with him and Kakuta are just two unfortunate circumstances that, hey, I like to gamble. Sometimes you get just because the law of numbers, things end up in a bad way, that bad things happen when they shouldn't have. And I feel like that happened for him, unfortunately, there. Alan Forel, is Shun a better tag wrestler or single wrestler in the Dragon Gate context?
Better singles wrestler. Just off the dome, looking at my old match of the year tracking sheets. UT in 2018, 2019, he has the Mochizuki match, the Pac match, the KZ match, the Kaito Ishida match, and the Ben K match. 2021, KZ, Kaito Ishida, Yamato, Kazuma Sakamoto, and a King of Gate empty arena Yamato match that was also incredible. Not to mention a Kaito Ishida. I'm sorry, that Yamato match was in Hokkaido. No. Yamato match was empty arena, and then he had a second Ishida match from King of Gate that was also pretty spectacular. 2022, that KZ match in Osaka that I just mentioned again. 2023, the Kikuta match, the Yoshioka match, a Big Boss Shimizu match from July King of Gate that year that I thought was unreal. 2024, nothing super high-end singles, but he didn't get a ton of opportunities to do so. And then 2025, he had the Yamato singles match, not only the one from January, but then the one from Kobe World. His tag resume is super impressive. I think his Triangle Gate or Trios resume is a little bit underrated, but no, he's like Mochizuki in the sense that you can look at all the great Mochizuki tags and he's still a better singles wrestler.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I think that because he became such a dominant figure and became like such the mainstay of the Dreamgate picture, and then I mean, we didn't really talk about it. Like this is the person that I would, at least the modern era of the Steel Cage Warfare Puestas match, I'd most identify it with Shun Skywalker, to be quite honest, because of you look at the 2019 match and then you fast forward to, okay, he gets Monte's mask, and then he takes Hamare's hair, he takes Hyo's hair, and it's just like he is someone that kind of is not necessarily put in the scenario that, yeah, you do have Kung Fu Masters versus Shun Monte at Kobe World that year, and like that is I mean, to this day, I think the best match to ever happen at Kobe World. But he just was not in a scenario really to have to be cycled down in a way that like Naruki Doi was cycled down for so long. So you got to see him in a lot of good tag teams. Shingo Takagi gets cycled down for a significant time period. I think if anything, 2 hours into this podcast, people can kind of pull from is that this is the person that when we write the book of Dragon Gate from 2021 at least, and we could probably go back a little bit further about this, if we're talking about who the true main character was, and yes, we did say D Courage were the main characters of 2022 and 2023, it was Shun Skywalker, and I think because of that, he wasn't necessarily put in those kind of tag scenarios in the ways that like Shima was.
I think, I mean, look, we're realistically almost done with 2026. We're going to be at the end of this decade.
Buddy, don't tell me we're almost done with 2026.
We're almost done with 2026. We're going to be at the end of this decade before people realize it. And we're going to really see the effects of the overconsumption era that we're in when we're in 2029 and we're trying to place all of these things historically and where things rank out. If he goes to New Japan, let's say he goes to New Japan,
sure,
and he reaches the same amount of success as a heavyweight that
because he will be a heavyweight.
Yes, the same amount of success as a heavyweight that Shingo reached as a junior heavyweight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I follow.
This is a guy who...
That's a Hall of Fame career.
Well, I don't know if it's a Hall of Fame career. I will say he certainly closes out the 2020s as probably one of the 10 most important wrestlers. I mean, you're going to have Ospreay, you're going to have
Kamatani, yeah,
Hangman, MJF, Mystico.
Did you say Cody?
I did not say Cody. Cody there. I refuse to say Roman Reigns. I think he could disappear from the earth tomorrow. Yeah, system quarterback. It makes absolutely no positive difference in pro wrestling whatsoever. Should not be in the Hall of Fame. I think you're a moron if you voted for him for the Hall of Fame.
Disqualifying vote if you do that.
It's awful. It just absolutely does not have an impact on the 2020s. But Cody absolutely does. I mean, from 2020 to now, I mean, I can't say Okada. I can't say Naito.
You won't be able to say Fletcher because it's too few years.
Although Fletcher was great from 2022 on,
I might need to reassess Aussie Open. I was very out on Aussie Open.
Watch Aussie Open in New Japan.
I think that's what I need to reassess.
Fletcher's very much in play for this. But if he even has that level of success in New Japan, if he's not a top 10 guy, he's probably a top 15 guy for this decade. And that is
without argument.
That's the air that he's operating in here.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that. Avengers 2-3 says, would have been less painful loss if Shun Skywalker jumped to an American company instead of New Japan. No, not for me. I mean, I think about the Dragon Gate things first, to be quite honest. And it's not going to change like this. I would say in America, it would be fascinating. I mean, that's a huge open question, what Shun Skywalker would look like in AEW. I do wonder if AEW would be the right place for him because of that. And WWE is out of the question, I feel like, with this. I do think that New Japan's probably the place that he has potential to be the most like Shun Skywalker, I would say.
I think if he went to Noah, he'd very quickly become GHC heavyweight champion. And although I have a lot of issues with Noah, I do think...
I would like to say, good for you, Shane Haste. You managed to pull off the Ric Flair room analogy in a match in 2026. Good for you.
I have been a legitimate Shane Haste fan since late 2013. I am elated about the year he's having. Although I will not watch his match against Naito, I have seen clips, and I am incredibly impressed with what Shane Haste pulled off in that match. I do think, for as many issues as I have with pro wrestling Noah, and there are many, I think I would have preferred him go to Noah more than any other place. I think Noah, New Japan, AEW would be my rankings. Actually, CMLL, Noah, New Japan, AEW would be my rankings.
Oh, but CMLL would be fascinating. I would love that.
Yeah, I really wish I really wish he was moving to Mexico. But
I have a match for you that would have happened. Him versus Volador Jr.
Him versus
That
Cavanario. I think
oh
he would match up really well with that roster. I think it's a bummer because I really like
he's like the perfect size for that roster too.
that WrestleCon 10-man, that CMLL versus Dragon Gate match was a little awkward at times, but I thought Shun in there with Mystico felt like a massive ordeal. And the crowd recognized it as well. And I would have really liked that. Maybe we get Shun on Fantastica Mania tours now, so maybe there's a pathway there. But I think his ceiling in Noah would be so high that I would prefer he go to Noah than New Japan. But Noah's Noah. That comes with its own list of issues. But him going to an American company, I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, him and Noah also, I think creatively, he would probably get less of a filter too, which would probably be good and maybe bad. Joe Gagné says, Shun's only loss since Golden Coliseum was to Johnny Valletta. I know you said fans would not think Hamari had earned a win over Shun, but who else should have beaten Shun, if anyone?
I mean, the problem is it's a roster full of cold guys. It would have been interesting if they would have done something with Shun and Hyo, and it would
could have gotten something out of it because Hyo's hot.
Yes, and it would have been interesting if they did something non-title with Shun and Tanaka. But otherwise, like, Kimura wasn't ready for that spot. Hamare was booking malpractice. Jason couldn't get anything from it because Jason's a heel. If Jason was a babyface, I would have a different opinion on that. Kame and Rita weren't. Yeah, but Kame and Rita weren't in a position to gain from it either. The answer is Hamare, but Hamare was just booked like a jackass for 2 months straight.
Right. Yeah. No. You couldn't even like Reiwa 6 is now like might as well be 10 years ago, so you couldn't even like pull up Jay or Yoshioka for that either. Inferno asks, Shun has had a lot of tag team partners over his career. Who would you say has been his best? I mean, Monte. I really think that Monte was a special kind of pairing with the two of them and allowed the two guys on the roster who had that level of height kind of play off of each other. I thought that there was a lot more mileage on the Shun Monte team. And the person that would have been his best tag team partner, sadly, is the guy who was probably one of his best opponents in Jackie Kamei. Shun and Jackie would have been a hell of a team.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I think Mochi and Shun probably have a deeper resume than Monte and Shun do.
Yeah.
Because I've complained about this a number of times. It's like Dragon Gate finds a good tag team, and then they become averse to putting them in tag matches. And that's what the Shun Monte run is so much shorter than people remember. They just happen to have 2 iconic Twin Gate matches between the Daya Yoshioka match at Dead or Alive and then the Kame Jason match at Kobe World. But they don't have a ton other than that. So the Mochizuki run is deeper, but I agree. I think his best partner was Diamante.
Yeah, I still think, imagine what if they were able to pay off any of the Kamei stuff. Like, that would have been so fascinating to see that happen. All right, the last question is from Fred Moreland. This is less Shun, more general Dragon Gate. The vibes around DG seem rancid. 12 or so months ago, they seemed decent, if imperfect. To my knowledge, the power players have remained the same at that time. Considering that, is there any semblance of hope for this promotion, or is it headed straight for the iceberg full speed ahead? I think there's certain. I think that this is a question that has to kind of be taken in parts. The power players are the exact same. I mean, Toru Kido, to everyone's knowledge, is the owner of Dragon Gate. Like, it's not just president CEO; it's a privately held company that all assumptions are that he owns it, especially after the Magnum talk. Ryo Saito does not seem to have any threat to his booking general managership, so that's just going to kind of stay there. But is there a semblance of hope for Dragon Gate case?
Yeah, of course there is. Again, this promotion's not all that different than it was in 2018, which is that I think World 2018 sort of calmed some choppy waters, and I think World 2026 did something very similar. The danger with this promotion right now is I think they could veer off course very quickly and take my confidence level, which is right now at about a 5, and make it a 2 very quickly. But also, it takes one guy getting hot. and that will elevate the rest of the roster. That's the issue with Shun's farewell and him putting people over is, like I just said, it was a roster full of cold wrestlers. There was nobody for him to put over. If you would have gone back 2 years ago, you would have a plethora of guys that could have lost to Shun on his way, or that Shun could have lost on his way out, and it would have elevated all of them. So no, I don't know. Maybe it's last man on the boat mentality, but I think it's silly to think about Dragon Gate as a ship headed towards an iceberg. They've been through worse. There's reasons to have hope. They have a super talented roster. If the roster sucked, if Kame and Rita and Gucci and KZ all leave tomorrow, okay, we can have a separate conversation. But
Right.
it's a talented roster. It's a deep roster. It's just a lot of mismanagement right now. But that can change very quickly. We see that with AEW, where they have these pay-per-view cycles that are sort of a disaster and they're super mismanaged and disjointed. And then they pick themselves up when they dust themselves off, and before you know it, they're white hot again. And I think Dragon Gate is a very similar thing. They just go through cycles, some longer than others, where they are a mess. And I think this is historically a mess of a period, but that could start to change tomorrow. You know, we've got an Osaka show waiting for us on the network right now. I haven't talked to anybody about it, but who knows? Maybe that show fills me with hope. I don't know, but it's not. I don't buy into the iceberg comparison.
Yeah, I think that we also have to keep in mind that the dragon system is not like the spring chicken it was before. Because I agree with everything you said there. I don't need to double up on that. This promotion, I mean, we're getting close to this promotion being 30. And when you look at the history of Japanese wrestling, promotions that turn 30 are very few and far between. And we've I would have to look up DDT. I think DDT just crossed over to that. Like Noah still has to get to 2030 before they turn 30. And if you wanted like date Toryumon to 1997, or if you want to date it to 1998, or if you want to go to 131.99, the reality of it is that you if you look at this promotion the same way that you would look at New Japan or All Japan, or at the time All Japan Women's Wrestling, there's ebbs and flows. And I think that issues are that you have a lot of things happening with I think that happens with calcification and within management and within like things being done in a certain kind of way, and that maybe not taking the thoughts of other people on the roster when they could, and that muddles things. And as it relates to is there hope with it? I mean, we've seen this isn't Michinoku Pro losing everyone in that time period. This isn't an Osaka Pro split. This isn't an OWE split. I mean, I was on the ground for we were both kind of there for that time period, and this doesn't feel like that. If there is a fear with it, it is the reality of that this is a company that I mean, realistically, like the business never got to where it was in January of 2020, and taking those years of COVID and reduced capacity, almost 2 full years of that, and having that with a promotion that relies so much on crowds, relies so much on engagement, on investment, and it did a level of damage that, I mean, it's still kind of coming to terms with it in a lot of ways, Case, I would say. And I think that all kind of clouds it, and that we have one guy who virtually has done it all in 10 years, still has 5 years left of stuff he could have done. But at this point, exiting now, I don't think that's going to an iceberg. I don't think that it is a symbol of bigger problems. I think that what you saw is someone who made this company of its size his for this time period. And as we saw with like Shingo Takagi, and as we saw from Akira Tozawa, I mean, Dragon Gate's never going to be the company that keeps people or keeps too many people that are not necessarily motivated to stay in the company. I mean, the money is never going to be there. It never has been there. And I think that is something that also kind of has to be considered in this. Like I mean, monetarily, Shun Skywalker is entering his prime earning years. If he has a level of agency, do you stay in the company that, pays you at one rate, or you just go to other places that, even though they might not be paying as much as they did in years past, still a significant step up? For someone, if you're looking at your career in that kind of way, Shun Skywalker is doing what Shun Skywalker is going to do, and that's not indicative of anything within Dragon Gate, I would say.
I'll end with this. I've covered Skywalker's career from his very first match to now. Throughout that time period, he's been my favorite wrestler to watch. He's been my favorite wrestler to analyze. He's been my favorite wrestler to cover. I think he is responsible for as many iconic moments in his own promotion over the last 10 years as anybody is to their own promotion. He is my favorite active wrestler. I will be very sad if he gets lost in the muck of a New Japan style that I do not enjoy. But covering Skywalker for the last decade has been one of the highlights of my time as an analyst. I will greatly miss watching him in Dragon Gate on a show-in, show-out basis, and I absolutely wish him the best going forward.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we always say why we love Dragon Gate. We love seeing a promotion that takes advantage of young talent and gives them the opportunity to prosper. And I think if you look at it in that kind of way, Shun Skywalker is kind of the best case example, right? I mean, he before he turned 30, he accomplished stuff that people like Masato Yoshino never did, and it is kind of it will be sad. I mean, he is a whole that is similar to Tozawa, that like there's going to be the what if, and there's going to be the personal enjoyment loss of your favorite guy in your favorite place. I could only hope that in the future for him, he's given the same opportunities and gets the same kind of chances that he got in Dragon Gate for the last decade, because this is someone that could very easily be one of the biggest stars in wrestling, not just in Japan, but in the world. And we just were fortunate to be able to cover him from the start. And I think on that note, we're going to close up shop here. This was a long one, but I had a feeling it was going to be. You could follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. That's both on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Cases out _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. There's the Voices of Wrestling Discord, which I want to extend a thanks to everyone who asked us questions for this show. That really was a great addition to do this, and we appreciate each and every one of those. But we have that channel as well as the Dragon Gate channel there as well, and we'll be back with you next week to talk some Rey de Parejas. Take care, everyone.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I am the host of the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, a show right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we take a deep look at individual issues and stories that are going on in the wrestling world. Each episode is about a different topic, and we take a thorough and educated look at things ranging from current booking trends to breakdowns on individual performers and angles to investigations into different fan cultures across the industry. In addition, we keep a close eye on the wrestling media, and as a professional journalist, I bring a unique perspective to how current issues in wrestling are being covered and discussed through the wrestling media. We have a revolving series of guests from across wrestling punditry joining us on each episode, and we hope that you make the choice to give us a listen on wherever you get your podcast from.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.